pressure looks good.
Following up. Roger, roll, Atlantic. Body downside, FTE off.
Yikes. You bet. Okay. We don't need any more of these.
And good morning, or good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Boca Chica for another NASA spaceflight stream. Today we are not watching tanks, we are watching towers. We have a tower stacking event going on today. On your screen you can see the tower that's already in place, and then the other tower to the right is hopefully going to be lifted on top. I am Stephen Marr. I'm a photographer for NASA Spaceflight, and I'm joined today by my colleagues, Chris G. Chris G, are you there?
I am indeed. Good day, Stephen. I'll say
Good,
that. How about that?
good day, sir.
you see, like, there's a reason that statement exists.
Well, we also have Michael Baylor pulling the strings behind the curtain. How you doing, Michael?
I'm doing well and excited to see this orbital launch tower come to life in Boca Chica.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's not any fire expected today, or no testing or anything. This is sort of just watching to see how an orbital tower is built, and this is actually kind of neat. They didn't have this sort of stuff back when like 39A and 39B were being built. We get to watch this live as it happens here in Boca Chica. Look at this view. That's really cool. So many cranes. Who knows about cranes? Where's our crane expert?
Well, I was gonna say, I mean, this is like Texas crane watching. I mean,
Yeah.
so yeah. See, we need like a bird crane, like like the crane. That's the
The
bird, the
actual
living
crane,
thing.
yeah.
Yes, the actual crane. To like, I realized I said bird crane, and immediately in my head I just pictured a crane picking up a bird, and I was like, no, that's not what I meant. Like,
It's how birds make it from point A to point B. They need the
yes.
bird crane. Hook up the bird crane. Hey, so as usual, if you have any questions, put them in chat at NASA Spaceflight so we can see them on our nifty little dashboard here that we've got. And anything you'd like to know, I'm not as good at answering questions as Mr. Chris Gebhardt over here, or Michael Baylor, but whatever you got, throw it in
Oh,
the chat, and hopefully we'll be able to answer your burning questions.
now that's not true, because if someone throws out a photography question, Stephen, they do not want me attempting to answer that, because I'm like, you mean like the Kodak point and shoot you got at weddings decades ago?
But it'd be fun.
But it'd be fun.
It'd
Yes,
be
it'd
fun.
be fun.
Hey, Chris, take a stab at that.
Yeah.
Shutter speed, ISO, aperture.
I would just start throwing out random phrases. Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, this should be good. This should be cool today, right? Because this is like another big milestone. You can sort of see like the crane family that they've got there, right? Where you've got
Yeah.
like the smaller little crane, you've got like the baby crane in between the two parent cranes, and then you've got the rebellious teenage crane off to the left-hand side that's not really with the family. But yeah, I mean this is very interesting, right? Because these types of cranes, you don't see them very often. But they're 100% necessary when you start getting, and when you're talking about stacking towers the sizes of what we're needing for Starship here.
Right. Because we've got to be taller
Because
than
if
Starship.
yeah, that's
And taller than Starship lifted however far off the ground. How tall is the launch platform itself?
that's actually a good question, Michael. Do we know how high off the ground the mount is going to end up being?
I think it's 460 something feet, including the lightning mast. So there's going to be a
Okay.
lightning mast on the very top, but
Oh, that's
I
the
think
tower you're saying, right?
yes.
How high up off the ground is the like will Starship be sitting? Like on the
On
Yeah,
the
launch?
like
launch
that
mount. I
table.
see. Oh, it's going to
Yeah.
be so there's the 6 white pillars you can see on the bottom left, but
Right.
those I believe are going to have another small bit of pipe going straight up before the launch mount, so I'm not sure the exact height, but it's going to be taller than the pillars you see now.
Gotcha. But in basic terms, right, Starship itself is about 120 meters tall, fully stacked, if you include from the base of the Super Heavy up to the tip of Starship itself. So the tower itself has to be taller than that. So the tower is going to be roughly 135 ish meters, right around there. So it'll be taller than Starship, and of course that's partly by design, because part of what this tower that's currently being put together by cranes is going to be meant to do is have a crane of its own, eventually, to either help pick up starships first, or it's going to have those big fancy catching arms to help maneuver the starship around and everything. But your tower's got to be taller than your rocket if you wish to have the tower do what you need to do. But this will also crucially, if they would ever to launch humans from Boca Chica, this would also be the tower where those crew members would go up and walk across the crew access arm and board Starship.
Yeah, and I think I saw something about an elevator around. Do we know, has that
I would
been?
hope.
Yeah.
Yes, they lowered the cab for the elevator into the base of the first segment yesterday on Mary's daily video. So there is going to be an elevator. It looks like just a construction elevator, not a fancy elevator like they have at 39A, but there is an elevator.
But good news, you don't have to take the stairs. You can take that elevator.
Yes.
It's important to
Yeah, I
note
was
that.
gonna say. I mean, go ahead, Michael. Yeah.
No, I was going to say the current crane that you see right now is not an indication of the final height of the tower. The height of the tower will be taller than that crane. So that
Oh
crane
boy.
will be, the crane can go taller. They will add more sections to it as they continue to stack the tower.
And yeah,
Yes.
that crane is sort of a mishmash of cranes, right? Like you could see it's like multicolored. It's like pieces of other cranes. Is that right?
I mean, it is a Libar 1300 or
Okay.
Liber. I think it's pronounced Liber, but it is a specific crane model. I'm not sure if that's different cranes of that same model that have been put together, or if there's compatibility between different cranes that certain models use common segments. I'm not sure, but it is a multicolored crane.
Yeah, just from this angle and distance, like the size of, I guess, the shaft that goes up, like these two cranes, they look the same size. It almost looks like those pieces could be interchangeable, but I'm not the crane expert. The crane expert has not arrived yet today. Crane expert slept in. Just
But I
kidding, we
mean,
don't have one of those.
yeah, but this will be interesting to see, right? Because this isn't unusual for the spaceflight community, right? To be needing sort of modular cranes, right? Sectionable cranes. I mean, gosh, sort of like if you ever had Lego crane sets, or erector sets, or anything as kids where you were building your own thing, right? And you would be able to mix and match. I mean, this is not anything new, because launch pads have lightning towers, right? And those lightning towers have to be taller than the rockets that are on them. And some of those rockets here in Florida, especially SLS, are very, very tall, right? So those lightning towers had to be taller. So you had to have cranes like that here at Kennedy as well, to construct some of the larger elements that you see in and around the spaceport here in Florida.
Yeah,
Yes.
it actually kind of blows my mind that they can make a crane that can lift this kind of stuff, because from a distance it looks so spindly, you know? It's like, how could it possibly lift something that big?
The strength of the material, and oh, the wonderful art of counterbalancing your center of mass,
Yeah.
you know which we've all seen videos of what happens when you don't do that properly.
Yeah. Yes, things fall
But
over. Yeah, that's not fun.
yeah, but yeah, no, what these cranes are actually capable of lifting, is what you get. You see these sections here, when the the fixed server structure that you see at 39A that SpaceX currently uses for the Falcon 9 in its crew and cargo configurations to access the Dragon V2 capsules. That tower was originally constructed as part of the mobile launcher for the Apollo program, so it was used to launch Saturn V's to the moon. And then when they were transitioning over to the shuttle program and they realized they needed a fixed structure instead of something that moved with the vehicle, much like SpaceX is building here, right? A fixed structure that the vehicle comes to it instead of
Right.
it goes to the vehicle for stacking. They were like, well, this is a perfectly good steel structure. There's no reason to throw it away. So they basically hauled they basically deconstructed some of the mobile launchers from the Apollo program and then used the cranes on others that still existed to move sections of steel over to create the tower at the shuttle launch pads. And because the Apollo MLs, mobile launchers, were a lot taller than the towers for the shuttle program, they didn't need to have cranes come in when they were reconfiguring between the two programs for the actual like pad work and everything.
Uh-huh.
They could use some of the existing structures, but then other things like when the arms would begin to arrive, they would need either cranes that were brought in to lift the arms or the cranes that were on the towers as well. But there's a large history of just building things in segments and sections. Is the larger point that I was trying to get to here, because what we were saying about counterbalancing and how much the cranes can lift, right? There's a reason that section is that size, right? And it's because you need margin and you can't outdo what your crane is capable of lifting.
Right.
So that's why it's not like one big go, just build the tower right there, just build the tower piecemeal. It's easier to build it in these sections and stages and then just move it over and under something that your crane can actually withstand.
Yeah.
It's important to note we do not have a timeline of when they're going to lift it. Just before we went live, they moved the section that's going to be stacked up to the crane on the self-propelled modular transporters. Then they have since attached the crane to the launch tower segment, but we're not sure how long it's going to take until they lift it, and it's always possible that it could, you know, the weather could become too windy or something, and they decide not to lift it today. So we're gonna watch what happens, but we're not sure if it's gonna. They could lift it in the next 5 minutes. They could lift it in the next hour or two. I'm not sure, but we'll wait and see what happens.
It'd be fun to ride that segment as they lift it up and put it on top of the tower.
Uh-huh.
I don't think that's allowed.
Anyway, do you
Let's
have any questions?
yeah, yeah, we do. Um, let's see. Do we know how many of these sections will make up the full height of the tower? I think I've read 7. That's
Yeah, I think 7 to 8 is what I've heard. I'm not sure if that includes. I think that does include the first section we see on the left. That's already been that section was pre-assembled on the pad. It was not stacked. They actually constructed that on the pad. So we're on the foundation, but we'll have to wait and see how long it takes them to build them. I think there are 2 other fully assembled sections back at the production site,
Mhm.
and we expect them to build several more. So it'll be interesting to see how quickly this thing goes up.
Yeah, that is
Yeah,
really cool. So we've got maybe six of these tower streams. So we may have to have a shirt, a Texas tower watching shirt or something.
And the
I
final
think so.
height
But
is
yeah,
the final
go
height
ahead,
is
Michael.
469 feet with this 10-foot lightning mast, I think, on top. The language in the FCC or the FAA document was kind of unclear if that lightning mast was in addition or part of the 469 feet. I think it's in addition, but the tower itself should be about 469 feet tall.
Okay.
Gotcha. So that's 142 basically 143 meters, and Starship is 120. So that gives you an idea of how much taller we're expecting the tower to be than the actual vehicle itself.
And of course, one of the primary functions of this tower is it will have a crane on top, which will be used to stack the vehicles. So it has, for that reason, it has to be taller than the vehicle itself.
Yes.
All right. Well, I went ahead and threw up that question because you went ahead and answered it without being prompted. But it was how tall is the launch tower going to be after the stack? And that was from A Dreamer. Let's see. Dave Wolf wants to know whatever happened to BN2. Because I know they were starting to stack it, right?
I think it's
Or-
going to be skipped.
Yeah.
There was we saw a BN 2.1 section as well. At one point, it seemed like they might be building a test tank out of it, but we've not seen any BN2 action for a while, and BN3 is now being stacked into high bay. So I think BN2 might be getting skipped. They did make a lot of changes to the design of Super Heavy as they built BN1, so it might have been that BN2 was outdated before it started being stacked.
Yeah, and they kind of did that with the early prototypes of Starship too, where it was more or less just figuring out how to put the thing together. And that was back when they had both the Boca Chica team and the Coco team working on it. It was like the competition of who can figure out how to build this thing, and it seems like that was decided, and they figured out what they needed to, and they moved most of their Starship focus over to Boca Chica. Every once in a while, there's still a little action here at the Coco site, but it's kind of unclear what it is. Um, one of the things I was kind of thinking about when I was thinking about doing this stream is, this is the first time that a private company has built their own uh, launch complex, right? And
Other than Rocket Lab, yeah. I think Rocket
okay.
Lab's technically first.
Oh, there. Okay, yeah, that's a good point. Well, what I was thinking is, I wonder if it's possible that in the future we see this as like a new normal. If as
Private
more,
ranges.
yeah, yeah, so they don't have to compete with other launch providers on whatever range it is.
Yeah.
I mean, I like
You
it being
know,
all kind of centralized here on the Space Coast. Like, I don't want this to happen, but I'm just curious. I mean,
I think
SpaceX
if
has
it
kind
were
of led
some,
the way on things a lot in the past, and I wonder if
yeah.
this really works out for them, if other launch companies are gonna be like,
You know, it potentially the problem. Okay, so I think two things, right? As long as we are rightfully not okay with land overflight
hmm
of populated areas, right? Because even if we can get boosters and vehicles to the point where like failures are really low, right? you know, uh, until we reach a point where that is very common, your number of launch locations are quite limited, at least in the United States, right? Because you have to be on a coast. You have to be not just on a coast, but at a particular point in the coast where it's advantageous to be, right? Because like,
you want to be south,
you
as far south as
exactly because
possible.
like yeah, well, because like Boca is a good example, right? Where at least from what we've seen so far, you kind of have to go east and you don't really have a lot of wiggle room in your inclination, at least from what we've seen so far, right, with Starship.
Yeah,
Um, so, if you start looking at places where it's advantageous to be where you're as far south as you can be, well, the Kennedy Space Center in Florida in Cape Canaveral is about as far south as you can go on the Florida Peninsula because it's all condos and massive populated areas south
right.
of there, right?
Yeah,
So
and it's kind of
where
nice
else
how
could you
Cape
go on
Canaveral,
the
like,
coast, right?
yeah, it's nice how Cape Canaveral kind of juts out into the ocean a little bit
Yes.
too. Yeah,
Yes, yes. And like rockets do have minimum temperature constraints, right? So you kind of you either have to build around the weather where you're going to be or you don't. It's not impossible. But to the point you're making about the private ranges, SpaceX sort of needed this because of the scale of the project, right? But we didn't see Blue Origin make their own for New Glenn. We saw Rocket Lab make their own because they're a New Zealand company and New Zealand American company, and nothing existed down there,
right,
right? And but when they then came here to the US, they didn't build a new one in Georgia. They didn't build a new one in Texas or California. They went to an existing one.
right,
So I think from just a model, right, there's still so much space left available at Vandenberg and the Cape and Wallops and Kodiak, which are the big ones here in terms of orbital flight locations, that use what we have before we need to start going and looking elsewhere. And the 45th had an interesting tweet the other day too. The 45th, I'm just going to keep calling them Space Wing right now. Of the Space Force had a good tweet the other week where they talked about, oh, this is our second flight in a couple of days, right? We're ready to support that. And also, we're ready to support when more than one flight a day might become the norm. So
Yeah,
I
we're a
think
little
a
way off
lot
from
of
that, but yeah.
a little ways off from that, but I mean, like, you can see where they might be thinking, like, there might be times where SpaceX might want to fly 2 Starlink missions in a day,
Yeah.
right? Or they might have a Starlink and a paying customer mission in a day where they might want to do, or SpaceX and ULA might want the same day, right? And they're separated by enough time where you can allow both to go. So I think range operators are really looking at how do we very, very quickly move toward the airport model, which sort of negates what you were questioning, Stephen, about whether private ranges would become more of a thing.
Yeah.
Because I think if the government ones can move as quickly as the private ones want, then the only real reason to have a private range like this is when the scale of what you're doing is just so immense nothing else can handle it. Right.
Yeah. Right, right. Because Delta doesn't have its own runways.
Right.
Okay, let's see. Let's see. We'll hit some of these super chats. $2 from DU89. That's a regular. I know that name. He said Fleet Cam has flying boats. I don't know what that means.
Maybe there were some people getting a bit sporty today or something. But
Maybe.
there is
I
an
think.
update from Mary. They are unbolting the base of the stand from the transporter, it sounds like. So that is a very
Oh,
good sign.
yeah. Awesome. There was a big boat race here in town, and it was called the Thunder on Cocoa Beach. It's like those really big speedboats, and I did see a picture of one flipping and going upside down. So I thought maybe they were talking about that, but
Ah.
yeah. Um,
But that's good
well,
if they're unbolting the bottom section of it. That should mean that lift is fairly imminent. I would imagine you wouldn't wish to unbolt the bottom of it unless you were ready to actually proceed with the lift.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're gonna need to take them bolts off. You don't want to lift the entire Earth with the segment.
Let's see what the lift to weight ratio of that crane is, right?
Yeah, yeah. Let's really figure it out. William Portela said, "Greetings from Brazil. Thanks for the support." Wait, they said thanks for the support. Well, thank you for the support. Matrix said, "SN17 officially skipped, and greetings from Germany." Yeah, do we know? Have they? Do we know for sure that now that SN15 joined the landing club? Um, yeah, what do we know about the next several SN numbers?
So SN17 had a hole cut in it yesterday or the day before, so that is a pretty good sign it's not going to fly. SN15 and 16 are still, fully constructed and potentially capable of flying, but if I go to this other camera, you can see the current skyline in Boca Chica is covered in cranes. So there's not going to be a flight test anytime soon. Soon being in Boca Chica terms. So anytime soon meaning in probably a week or two. Of
Yeah,
course, of course, they could always move the cranes, but right now there are no indications that they plan to fly SN15 anytime soon. The Raptors have been uninstalled, and they would also have to install the landing legs again if they were to fly it for a second time. So until we see the landing legs or new Raptors heading out to the pad, it does not appear that SN15 is going to be flying in the near future. It seems at the moment their priority is on constructing the orbital launch pad. Of course, every time they fly a Starship, they have to clear the area and have some road closures, which delays the actual construction of the orbital pad. So the plan right now is to focus on the orbital pad. It is likely, one of the most common or likely outcomes, and I believe this is actually the current plan, is for the next flight to be straight to orbit and to skip a reflight of SN15 and potentially a flight of SN16. However, I still think those plans may swing back. They have two perfectly good starships capable of flying, and I think this orbital pad is going to take longer than they hope, especially when it comes to getting the regulatory approvals they need to fly. So I think if the orbital pad gets delayed for several months, and you have two starships ready, let's say the orbital launch tower is complete, the tank farm is complete, would you really not get more data from another test flight? That's my question.
Absolutely. Let's see. Let's hit a couple questions here. Fabian Raymond wants to know how tall is one section. So we mentioned that. So the tower is 469 feet. Let me pull out the calculator.
Yes.
469 divided by, we think, 7 segments. So that's roughly 67 feet each. That seems about right, doesn't it? That seems kind of close to what we're looking at, right?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, so the real answer is we're not sure, but somewhere in there, in that 67-foot range.
It's a good
Uh,
estimate. Yeah.
yeah. Let's see. Mr. Beatniks said, okay, this might be our crane expert. It's a Liebherr LR 11350 with a power boom. In the actual configuration, it's 102 or 104 meters high. So that is not quite tall enough. That's not gonna do the trick. We're gonna need a bigger crane.
More sections,
Yeah.
more bigger cranes, exactly.
Yeah, the maximum height of this crane is well tall enough to stack tower, so they will add more sections as they build the tower.
Mr. Cheese wanted to know, will those cranes be able to stack the tower to full height? Yeah, that's sort of what Mike
Yeah,
was
I just
just
I just looked up the maximum hoist height for not this configuration of the crane, but this Liebherr 1300 model is 774 feet or 236 meters is the maximum hoist height, but that's probably that might I don't know if that like considers if the crane is higher than the object is lifting, so I'm not sure if that's, from ground level, but the crane can't get much taller.
Yeah, that's a trick they use sometimes, isn't it? Like they'll maybe like build a mound or something to get the base of the crane up
Yeah,
higher.
144 meters. It looks like
Okay.
is the maximum boom. So that would be how high it could lift something from ground level, assuming
Okay.
the crane was at the same height as the object it was lifting. The 144 meters is 472 feet. So that would be tall enough.
Right.
Yep. And on that last section, you only need that foot of clearance to get it over the mounts and lower it down, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to, yeah, well they lift it to just about to where it would stop and then yeah, I guess that would work. I don't understand a reason why you wouldn't want to do that. Let's see. Ruben Forster says, "Do you think they'll use the cranes to stack Starship and Super Heavy before the tower is finished, or might they get the tower done before that?" That is kind of a good question because it could be that they're ready to fly before the tower is actually ready to lift
Nah,
anything onto the launch mount.
tower
No,
first.
tower
Yeah,
first.
Yeah, the like the sections of the tower, like getting a tower, like sections actually stacked on top of one another is actually the easier part of like building a tower, right? Because then because then you have a whole bunch of other things you need to put in there and you need to outfit that tower with. Now, something that sort of works to SpaceX's favor is there's no big umbilical swing arm that goes over to the second stage to Starship, right? It's all fed through the propellant lines from the booster, right, at the base, and um, so that helps when you're not routing propellant lines and everything up it, but you still have all the electrical work, the elevator outfits, um, the crew access arm that needs to go on and things like that. So there are things that they'll end up not needing on the tower for the first orbital flight, but tower first, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the tower actually might be the first major component done at the orbital launch site. You look at the launch stand right now, and if I
Right.
go to the other camera, the launch stand right now is still just those 6 pillars. There's no actual launch table on it yet. And I assume the launch table is going to take a lot of work to install because so many commodities are going to have to be connected to it. So you can also
Exactly.
look at the ground support equipment tanks on the left-hand side of your screen. There's 2 tanks right now. There's supposed to be 7 cryo tanks and 1 water tank. So still a long
Right.
way to go there, and none of those tanks have had their insulation shell installed yet. So the ground support equipment tanks are definitely, I think,
Yeah.
behind schedule, at least per
Yeah.
their original July 1st target, which is not going to happen. You hear that here. But um, yeah, and then FAA approval is another big one. So lots of things to happen. I
Right.
think the orbital launch tower will be ready in time.
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
You heard it here first, folks. Let's see. Musical Wolves with a super chat says, "On the road, did wind and rain cause any slowness in production last week?" Um,
Oh yes.
oh,
Just
they had a
just
really
sort
bad
of.
storm. Yeah, I forgot all about that. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So in general, I mean, yes, it caused some slowdown, right, last week. There were severe storms that moved through the area. This whole sort of Texas area is sort of all wrapped up in a frontal system and an associated low that draped itself across Texas and Louisiana and has brought massive rains to those states and really severe weather. So there were slowdowns because anytime you do have severe weather like that, your team has to stop and they have to shelter. And everything along those lines. But in terms of like big delays, like, oh no, the storm like damaged something majorly important, haven't heard anything along those lines, but it definitely would have slowed down the day for them and a few things in work. Yeah.
And if you're just joining us, if you didn't catch the beginning, we are not watching any Starship testing or anything. So don't expect to see any fire. What we're watching is the construction of the orbital launch tower, which
Yes, we have.
is
We're covering the thing that gets us to the next Starship stream.
exactly. Yeah, and like I said before, it's kind of neat because, I didn't see a live stream of the launch tower for 39A get built. Well, I guess originally it was the mobile launch tower for Apollo. So this is kind of neat.
That would have
Um,
just been called a live news broadcast back in the day.
right, yeah.
The
On one of the
evening news with
three,
Walter Cronkite. Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
one of the three available channels.
And let's
Um,
be clear, it's Walter Cronkite, and I'm sure there were others. No idea who.
yeah. That's right. Yeah, every documentary or anything I've watched from back in those days, it's all Walter Cronkite.
It's Walter Cronkite. Yep.
Yeah. So we're not Texas Tank Watchers today. We are Texas Tower Watchers. But the Texas Tank Watchers shirt, is available in the NASA Spaceflight store. If you want to head over there, show your support. Everything that you guys do really helps us out here. That we would not be able to do this if not for the support of the community. There you
Yes.
go.
And
You
there's
see up
that
there.
graphic. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what
Yeah.
else we
It's a
still
great
have in
Yeah.
shirt.
stock, I think? I'm pretty sure we still have the SN15 landing club. So if you have been wanting to celebrate SN15's landing, you still have some time. I love that shirt. So
Indeed.
cool.
Yeah.
I
It's a
know
great
mine
shirt.
arrived. Mine arrived last week. It's a good fit. I like it.
I've gotten so many tweets I see on Twitter of people getting their merch in the mail and trying it on for the first time. So if you get your merch, make sure you send us a tweet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. I can't wait like to see like just be out and about and see someone wearing one and go like, "Aha!"
Yes, out and about and seeing one wearing it at a like totally unprompted, not like a space. I mean, if we see you at
Not a space
like on
event.
a
Yes,
spaceflight event,
exactly.
that's very cool. Don't get me wrong, but
Yeah,
even cooler is when it's totally unexpected.
yeah,
Exactly, exactly.
absolutely.
I have a DOS art shirt that doesn't say DOS art, right? So like only someone watching that Perseverance landing is gonna get it. Uh,
Yes.
so I'm waiting for the day that that gets recognized out and out and about.
In the meantime, people probably just think that it's a child's drawing or something. Like,
Probably like that's so cute. He had his
yeah.
child's drawing made into a shirt.
And Doss, if you're out there, take that in the spirit in which it's intended.
No, I'm sure he does. Yes.
But yeah, there you go. So there's a store. If you need need some clothing, hey, might as well support the team.
Yes.
Um,
But I think what you were saying there, which kind of got us to the store and merchandise and stuff, is an important point, right? There's no launch today. The only thing that we're expecting to see leave the ground and go airborne is the gray tower structure that the crane is attached to right now. That the sort of bobcat or the sort of like excavator, yellow excavator, is in front of right now. That is the second of either 7 or 8 segments of the launch tower at the orbital launch site that SpaceX is in the process of constructing and stacking ahead of orbital flight tests for Starship and Super Heavy boosters. So that's what we are expecting, but no big exciting Raptor engine firings or anything like that. I believe this is what DOS refers to as the crane assisted takeoff today of the tower segment here. And we are actually expecting that somewhat momentarily. Mary did indicate, Mary is on the ground there. I believe this is her camera, is
Yeah,
it
so I was
not?
actually going to move slightly to get that thing
Ah,
out of
yeah.
the way. So that was her camera, but she's moving.
Yes, so Mary was right there, and she did mention just a few minutes ago that they have begun the process of unbolting the tower segment from the ground transporter. So things definitely progressing there. You can see the dynamic weather situation off the well behind. I have no idea what direction that is, so I'm not even going to try. But you can see it off behind the tower there. Texas has been, South Texas in particular, has been battling some persistent weather, including some severe weather the last few days, but things do appear to be okay, at least for right now, in continuing those preps to hoist that tower segment. This is a great view because you can see that tower segment there. That's already built and attached to the concrete section, the sort of one that's over on the far right side of your screen. Immediately to its left, you see the tower segment attached to the crane that's about to be lifted today. And then you see some of the ground support equipment tanks for the orbital launch site. And then you see Starship SN-15 on the, ooh, help me out, Michael. It's
Pad
pad
B.
B, right? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Yes, where it has been for a little while now undergoing post-flight checkouts and deservicing operations there. But a nice little pic of the Boca Chica launch site right now.
yeah, yeah, I love this. Yeah, that color behind it. Oh, and here comes the
Here's part of the Air
boat.
Force.
Yep.
We have a shirt for that too, by the way, if you want to
Yes.
support your avian friends. Yeah.
Oh, he's ready to go with it too.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay, so we've got M. Kelly. We've got a new member. Thank you for that support, that ongoing support. We really need that. We've got Gary with $20. Thank you very much. Tomas says, I have 2 questions, and sorry, one is not Starship related. First, how long can Starship stay in space waiting for refueling till all fuel boils off? Okay,
Ooh.
that works. Oh, I see. He's got
Um,
the other question
yeah.
is after that. Okay.
Yeah, so I also love the way you broke your name so we knew how to pronounce it. That was awesome.
Tomas.
Yeah, I see the euro makes sense now. Okay, so that first one, how long can Starship stay in space waiting for refueling until all of its fuel boils off? So yeah, so It's going to be a function of how much it's left with. So we know a fully fueled Starship hauling a fully sorry, a Starship carrying a pretty heavy payload, right? Can basically get itself to orbit, but it can't do anything after that, right? Uh, aside from what we would expect, aside from what we expect might be like a deorbit burn if it's doing just like a satellite mission, right? Because we know, and here's how we know some of this, right? So if it was just like taking something to geostationary transfer orbit or potentially even geo, if it was taking like even two or three big comsats at a time, right? Which it can do, right? Because that's one thing Starship's going to be able to do, a lot of ride shares for things. Um, we know it could do that mission and come back and land. And the main reason I say that is because we know that Starship can do a translunar injection burn on what's known as a free return trajectory without having to be refueled, because the current flight plan for the Dear Moon mission calls for a liftoff from Boca Chica, and 31 minutes later, the translunar injection burn begins. Well, there's absolutely no way to do refueling on that. So
Yeah.
that tells you a little bit of how much on a fully operational mission with people. Right now, obviously, it's not carrying a huge amount, but environmental control and life support, the interior, the interior outfitting of what a Starship crew cabin looks like, all of those things, right, are mass that's added to the vehicle. So we know it can do that. So that sort of gives us an understanding of what could it do in low Earth orbit, right? Because what Elon has basically said is, if you don't put a payload in it and you just use Starship itself, the second stage, not the super heavy booster, Starship itself could basically single stage itself to orbit, but it's useless at that point because it's used all of its propellant. So that is the preface to your answer, which is a long time. Is how long Starship can stay in space after being inserted into orbit while it's waiting for refueling, because it's got a significant amount of propellant left over in those tanks based on what the super heavy booster can leave it with. And cryogenic management in orbit is a really well known and a really well understood thing. This is in part where Starship's heat shield, which is primarily for atmospheric entry, will come in really handy, because it will provide some more thermal conditioning for those tanks. And then basically, you can either roll your vehicle or aim your heat shield in various ways so that you never allow the skin of the vehicle in one location to get super hot. And what that allows you to do is control how much heat is being transferred through the exterior skin of your vehicle and thermal protection system tiles on part of it. And that can allow you to keep the cryogenics in your tanks very, very cold and under cryogenic conditions. And really, you wouldn't lose a lot as you're waiting for tankers to come up and refuel. Um, great question. Thank you for bearing with me on the preface to that. And
Look, I
there's a second one. There not? Yes, I
yeah,
think.
there is. I just I like what we're seeing here. We're actually seeing them
Oh, I
unbolt
know.
it
Are they?
here. This is
I was gonna
awesome.
say
Thank
this
you,
either
Mary.
looks.
This is a great view.
This
Just
is. I mean,
two
look
guys with
look
a
at that.
big
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, this is lever and fulcrum and all of
Yeah.
the engineering terminology.
Three,
Insert
two, one. Rotate.
fulcrum.
Right.
Yeah.
Righty tighty, lefty loosey. Come on.
Oh, okay, so look, so they lift it up just a little bit so they could get to the top of that bar and get
It's like
more
a
leverage.
ratchet. Yeah. Look at that. Yeah.
I don't like. I shouldn't be so amazed by this, but you know, I've never seen this
It's
before. This is great.
it's the sheer manual element of what's happening now that fascinates me
Absolutely.
most.
Yeah,
Like,
they're not out there with like a massive industrial pneumatic drill. You know, this is just
right? Just zhung, zhung, zhung.
couple of folks just just cranking on some bolts. Man, how many
This
bolts
is
are there? That's a
Well,
lot.
this is when like the piece of so like there's a whole bunch of furniture that just arrived that needs to be put together now
Uh-huh.
at my house. And like I'm always that person that, like, when I open the furniture, or when I open the box and it immediately shows me a manual flathead screwdriver, I always just start swearing because I know it's going to go downhill quickly from there. Like if it's manual,
Yeah,
so like
yeah.
I
Why do they
like the
even
fact that
even?
this is manual is amazing to me. Like,
And if it's gonna be manual, don't use flathead. The
I
screwdriver slips
see
off
that
a flathead screw so easily.
exactly, which is usually why I just go pour a drink at that point.
Oh man.
But
Okay.
no, this is fascinating. Like the manual element to that was absolutely fascinating. Thank you for stopping us and making us focus on that for a second.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, yeah. So the second part of Tomas's question. Okay, yeah. So this is about Vulcan. Why is the Vulcan
Mhm.
Centaur with 14 tons to GTO, but the New Glenn can get only 13.5 tons to GTO, even if it can bring twice as much to Leo than Vulcan?
Uh,
Did,
okay. So I'll start with I'll start with so why is Vulcan so Vulcan Centaur 14 tons geostationary versus New Glenn as 13.5. This is where your upper stage and the engine that you use matters a lot.
oh, yeah.
Yep, that Centaur is an incredibly efficient upper stage engine. Sorry, upper stage, and the RL-10 is an incredibly efficient upper stage engine, and they're putting two of them on that upper stage for the new version of Centaur, the sort of next gen version of Centaur that is debuting with Vulcan. Um, and so the upper stage has a big component to it, right? Because the more efficient your engine, the more powerful that lower stage is. And remember, Vulcan Centaur can strap 6 solid rocket motors onto the side of that thing as well. Blue Origin's just got the first stage of New Glenn.
Right.
Right. So without any augmentation, those 6 boosters really, really, really help. The other thing is in that first stage of Vulcan, you are not trying to leave any propellant in the stage for a booster flight to a drone ship for a landing and a recovery. Whereas on New Glenn, you have to reserve some propellant in your first stage, which reduces the overall efficiency of that first stage, not by an overall lot, right? But anything you don't burn out of that stage is extra mass that is not being burned efficiently from the payload perspective, even if it's being burned the most efficiently from the mission profile perspective.
Right.
So because you need to reserve some to get that first stage back, it can have knock-on effects to the amount of payload that you can bring to certain destinations. Especially like we said, since New Glenn cannot strap anything to the side of its first stage for thrust augmentation like the Vulcan is designed to. So that's how you get 14 tons to GTO and 13.5 to New Glenn, even if their Leo numbers are slightly different there. Right.
And one interesting thing while you're talking about this, I'm thinking, well, SpaceX improved the Merlin engine as they went, and now they can get more mass to
Mm-hmm.
orbit and still land. And I'm thinking, okay, well, Blue Origin might do that along the way too. But you know what? The numbers on Vulcan and New Glenn will go up because Vulcan is using the same engine, so
Yes,
the numbers
indeed.
the
There.
numbers will rise together. If Blue Origin, if they're able to do, some incremental improvements on the BE4 engine, Vulcan will enjoy those same benefits.
And now they should. I'll put a couple caveats on this though.
Okay.
So it should, right? Now, the main difference that you will see, now the main difference that might come there, right, is it might give you a little bit more efficiency and a little bit more performance margin on the Vulcan, but you wouldn't see as great of a change or a difference as you would with New Glenn, and that's because of the number of engines that they're using,
Right.
right? Vulcan only uses 2 BE4 engines. The New Glenn base uses more. So the more engines you
7,
have,
isn't
if
it?
you can, seven, I believe, yeah, on the first stage.
Right.
And the more engines that you have, right, and the more you're able to, basically eke out of some of them, or eke out of them, right? That adds up. And we've seen that most prominently on Starship's super heavy vehicle, right, which has reduced the number of engines that it has from 31 down to 28, not because they were like, oh, we want to save mass, but because they ended up increasing how much they could get out of the Raptors, that they were actually able to eliminate some engines
Right.
from the overall design. Um, it- so that's sort of my way of saying, like, if you can eke a little bit more out of your engines, well, the amount that you can more that you can eke out times seven is automatically going to be greater than what you can eke out of two. That's the first caveat on. So what that might be more towards saying, like, New Glenn might eventually get to that 14 ton to GTO limit because of improvements to the BE4 engine, right? Whereas I wouldn't necessarily expect Vulcan Centaur to increase much more from that 14 based on what you said there. Now, the other
Mm.
thing is, this assumes that whatever contract ULA has with Blue Origin for the BE4 engine includes those types of upgrades. And if they don't, then you could run into something where ULA is getting one version of the engine and Blue Origin is taking the upgraded one for themselves and not allowing a quote unquote competitor to have it. Um,
Yeah, it's a very odd
we
situation, isn't it?
It very much is. I am immensely fascinated how one company purchasing another one's engine when that company is about to be a competitor. I have
Hmm.
no idea how that's going to go in the long term. I am fascinated to see it, but it's not exactly like you can redesign Vulcan at this point.
It's
So
it's like
either, yeah, something's going to happen, and I'm very intrigued to see how that continues to work.
it's like a buddy of mine met Tori Bruno a little while back, a couple years ago, but it was
Mhm.
after they'd made the decision to go with the BE4 for Vulcan, and my friend was wearing a Blue Origin hat, and Tori was he was giving him a hard time about the hat. He's like, "Oh, we got to get you a ULA hat," and he's like, "Wait, but it's your engines though. It's what you're using for engines." So yeah, it is. It's kind of I'm sure they
Yeah.
get along just fine, everybody, but it's kind of an interesting, just from a business perspective. It's interesting that two competitors are using one of those competitors' engines.
Well, it is because, and then we'll go back. I promise we'll go back and talk about Starship again in a second. This is just a fascinating question
It's just a
about
good
some of the
question. Yeah,
other
thanks,
big
Tomas.
newer rockets that are using. But specifically, like, this is really connected because it's these are the other two major rockets, right? That are the pushover to methane and methalox
Hmm.
cycles.
Yeah,
So it is interesting to talk about because the other one is Starship with Raptor,
right.
right? So they are connected, but yeah, I mean, from the engine perspective, like, this is different from how it's both similar to how ULA operates and different because ULA is not an engine company. They don't make their own engines.
Hmm.
They make the tanks and they make the tanks. They make some other things, but they don't even make the whole rocket. Right. Different components are made by different companies outside of ULA even. So it's not surprising that ULA bought an engine from somebody else for Vulcan, right? Because they do this all the time with Aerojet Rocketdyne right now, which produces the engines on the Centaur upper stage and will continue to do so. What was interesting is there was another engine under development by Aerojet Rocketdyne specifically for the Vulcan rocket, and ULA chose the BE4 instead.
Right.
Now, I say that's weird because Aerojet Rocketdyne doesn't build their own rockets. They don't have a fleet that's in competition or potentially in competition with ULA. So the choice to go with the BE4 was very interesting, and that, it's all very, very fascinating. But yeah, ULA buying an engine isn't surprising so much as it is which engine they chose to buy, and then that engine popping up on another vehicle after that.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, very, very interesting to see how that will go.
And I remember when all that was going down a few years ago, and kind of thinking like it's going to be surprising if they go with Blue Origin's engine, because they're a competitor and because they're new. They're it's they're a new company coming into the fray, and they had Aerojet Rocketdyne that's been around for a very long time. So it was pretty surprising that they went with the BE-4.
Mhm.
Okay, let's hit some of these super chats and questions here. This is not a name, this is a face, but this face with $2 says humanity's true future is in space, not Mars. Well, I mean, it's both,
Well,
I think.
eventually, but both, yeah.
Yeah. Um, Wesley Heron says, "Do we suspect that the failure of a single heat tile during reentry would result in a RUD?" And for those that don't know, that is a rapid
It's
unscheduled disassembly.
Do we suspect that the failure of a single heat shield tower during entry would result in a red? No, I do not. Couple of reasons for this. So obviously what we are thinking about here is a kind of like a Columbia type situation, right? Where if the heat shield gets breached in some way, how bad is that for Starship?
Right.
Um, in this case, not bad, and we can actually look to another shuttle flight for an example to this of how. So basically, it comes down to what the structure of the vehicle is underneath the heat shield. That is what truly plays the biggest part in if you have a heat shield breach of some kind, how bad might it become during atmospheric entry? Um, the shuttle was an aluminum airframe on under most of under most of the thermal protection system. So when the thermal protection system was breached, it was a very, very big deal because aluminum has an incredibly low melting point compared to the temperatures that are experienced by the orbiter during atmospheric entry. Um, However, the steel that Starship uses has a much, much, much higher melting point, so much so that they don't even need to cover portions of the vehicle. That you can just polish it, and the reflectivity is enough to radiate that heat back away from the vehicle to a degree where the steel structure of the vehicle is fine.
Yeah.
Um, so if you were to lose a thermal protection system tile on the bottom of the vehicle, not ideal, but I wouldn't necessarily be expecting a catastrophic burn through if a single heat shield tile came undone. And the reason for this is we can look to the STS-27 flight of the shuttle Atlantis. This was a classified Department of Defense flight that lifted off on December 2nd, 1988. It was only the second flight after the Challenger accident. And during first stage flight, a whole bunch of thermal protection system material broke free from the nose cone of the right-hand solid rocket booster and impacted the right-hand side of Atlantis. It somehow managed to miss the reinforced carbon-carbon panels on the wing leading edges of the orbiters, or if it hit, they did not break. But what it did do was damage or destroy over 700 thermal protection system tiles and completely removed a couple of them
Whoa.
on the underside of the vehicle in areas that experienced really intense heating during atmospheric entry. And the only thing that saved Atlantis from being destroyed during atmospheric flight, during atmospheric reentry on that mission, was the fact that where the tiles were completely stripped away from the vehicle just happened to be over an area reinforced with steel because there was a communications plate underneath it. And it
Oh,
was the steel and the higher melting point that prevented the burn through on STS-27 when Atlantis
wow.
was coming back. If you haven't seen the pictures, they are beyond disturbing because you can see it on the TV footage from 1988 when she's landing at Edwards
Oh
of
man.
just the damage down her right side. And because it was a classified DoD mission, the crew were not allowed to use a bunch of the cameras that could actually figure out how bad the damage was. They had to use these really low quality television cameras and broadcast them on encrypted transmission lines down to mission control. And of course, the resolution was so bad that nobody could really tell how bad the damage was. So it was just like, you're fine, come
Yeah.
on home. And apocryphal or not, I think it's true, because I'm pretty sure it came from the commander of that mission, that if he saw sensors going awry, he planned to activate his microphone and let everyone know what was happening.
Oh man.
So
Yeah, I was just looking at a
Steel's a
picture.
good
That is,
choice for Starship. Steel's a very good choice for Starship. And no, we wouldn't expect a single heat shield failure like that to lead to anything catastrophic in like what we're thinking of when we think of the shuttle program and the accidents that we have had with heat shield breaches.
yeah, I went ahead and like pulled up another tab so I could remember to look this up later, but I already see a photo of a completely missing tile and charred material underneath.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's scary business.
Yep.
Um, okay, so let's see. Alexander Ash. This looks like a hypothetical here. Okay, so Super Heavy gets caught by the tower but goes wrong, meaning this tower would have to be torn down and started again. That's a big timeline.
Yep.
Yes. Yep, that would not be good.
Yep. I think I think we might see a few practice runs first. um,
Yeah.
maybe aimed at things without arms, or maybe we might see we might see them test other things with the landing. We might see them want to um nail down more of the AI, right, and the logic that the software is using as it's descending. Because one thing that the logic is going to have to get used to, right, is recognizing that that tower is supposed to be there and not
Oh
to fly
yeah.
away from it, right,
Right.
not to divert away to a safer landing location, right, which the Falcons and the Starships to some degree have the ability to do if they detect a hazard as they're coming in, right. They can sort of adjust the aim point at the landing pad last minute, right, as
Yeah.
they're assessing their surroundings. So that's definitely going to be something that, the software logic is going to have to get used to. Now, I don't say that as a I don't say that as, oh my gosh, that's such a big obstacle, because anyone who's ever driven in a Tesla knows that one thing that Elon's companies do very well is software.
Yeah.
And understanding and seeing the surroundings, and understanding, to the best that a machine logic can process the visual world, what's actually there, what's supposed to be. It's why, like, when you tell your car to it's like when you tell a Tesla to automatically change lanes and there's another car in the lane you're trying to move into, it doesn't move, right? If you're moving into a center lane and there's another car in the right hand lane, let's say, it's constantly looking at what that other car is doing. And if it senses it's starting to drift over toward the lane you're actively merging into, it will abort the merge, right? And bring you back into a safe lane. Well, it's the same principle here, only, the flight logic and the software logic has to be the tower's getting bigger and closer. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Aim for the moving arm, you know?
How could how could you even test it though? Like there's not another tower like a practice tower that they could use. What?
Well, here's where we might have practice towers, because they have Phobos and Deimos, right?
True. True.
And maybe, and again, I mean, this is all part of this is all part of how I'm very fascinated in how they're going to test this, because you are exactly right. Like the Falcon 9s, when they were practicing their landings before they were, quote unquote perfected, on the drone ships, like, well, it didn't matter if they tipped over afterward, because it was a drone ship, right? And they had kind of built the drone ship to withstand that.
Yeah.
Um, Something that could work in their favor here is that there's very little propellant left in a Starship and a booster when they'd be coming in to do those landings with the grabbing it by the tower. So like your potential RUD energy, if you were to have a failure at that point, isn't as much as if you were fully fueled coming, leaving the launch pad. So in that regard, like, they might be putting blast shields on sides of the towers, right, to protect against that. So maybe but I still think that first attempt is going to be out over the ocean. I don't know if they'd risk the only operational launch facility in a recovery catch attempt if they have Phobos and Deimos that could mitigate. At least you could keep launching if you needed to rebuild a tower,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
On
You have
one
at
of the
least two
on one
attempts.
of the God, I almost call them drone ships. They're not drone ships really. But you know what I mean.
Yeah. What do we call them?
I'm just gonna call them Phobos and Deimos and
Okay.
stop there.
Fair enough. Let's see. Moving on. We are getting a little behind on our questions, so we're gonna try to burn through them quickly if we can. Um,
I can be brief in my answers. I can
okay.
try.
Chris Lemur or Lemur said, "What are your thoughts on the lack of a proper flame trench under the orbital launch platform?" Well, we have talked about that before, and the thing is there's no flame trench on Mars, so they
Yeah.
need to design Starship and Super Heavy to be able to launch and land without having a proper flame trench. So I think that's
Yeah.
pretty much that, right? Like that's
Well,
kind
I
of
mean,
why they
Super
didn't
Heavy
go.
won't launch from Mars, though. I still think
Well,
it's crazy that Super Heavy doesn't have a flame trench.
I
And
guess
Elon
yeah,
even
that's
said they might be making a mistake with that, so we'll see what happens. I don't know. It's pretty close to the ground support equipment tanks, and there's no flame diverter to direct the flame away from the equipment at the pad. So we'll see.
maybe they'll put up some kind of shields in front of that stuff.
Yeah, I think there is going to be a big berm, but I don't know if the berm's going to be as tall as the tanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Salty Meat Hook says, Michael, are you LD3 in Quake Live Madhouse server?
Nope,
There you have it,
different
folks.
person.
Yeah, someone else completely. Steve Ehrman with $5 and no question, but thank you very much. We appreciate the support. Phil Monk wants to know, is Frankencrane definitely going to be tall enough to finish the launch tower? Thanks for the coverage.
Yes, indeed it will, but
Yes.
just
Yeah.
barely.
Yeah. They'll make it longer if they have to, but it'll
Yeah,
do the job.
what did we figure out? It can basically lift it like 3 meters taller than what it needs to be or something like that.
Right.
Which for that top section is all you need. Yeah.
Okay, so Sandy AP says, I'm feeling they want to finish any major construction by August before peak tropical activity to minimize disruption and damage from tropical storms. I mean, that's a good observation. I think SpaceX wants to power forward as quickly as possible in all circumstances.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah. It's a good question. And we spend so much time talking about hurricane season in Florida. Yeah, we should talk about hurricane season in Texas because
yeah,
it's a little different. It's a little different. Texas is sort of a potential hurricane season in totality target. Especially this. So, in basic terms, hurricane season sort of runs in this general way of what regions you're looking at for development. It starts in the Gulf primarily in the early parts of the season, or the Caribbean near the Floridian Peninsula. Um, then it spreads to the rest of the tropics as we get toward the peak of the season and those monster storms that come across the almost entirety of the Atlantic. And then it sort of shifts back over to the Gulf. But in that stretch, right? Even that stretch where you're primarily watching storms coming off of Africa that generate the bigger storms that move across the Atlantic in August and September, those can still track into the Gulf and slam Texas and Louisiana. So it's not so much that they're just going to try to beat hurricane season. They're in hurricane season. They almost got hit by one already, or took a glancing blow from one already that ended up not getting named, but it was one that, like, if it had hung out in the Gulf for a few more hours, it might have gotten a name before it came ashore
yeah,
here last week. So it's not really a factor of hurricane season in that regard, especially since the Boca area is pretty much a year-round potential. It's just the peak moments when you're more worried about it are bookended at the beginning and the end of the quote unquote season. course, what that is anymore, I'm not really sure. The
Yeah.
date delineations very much need to change. Um,
Yeah, because the
but
storms have started
yeah,
earlier the last few years, or earlier
yeah,
than quote unquote hurricane season.
yeah, and there is talk, like the National Weather Service this year did begin issuing outlooks earlier, and there was some discussion about moving the date to May 15th for the start of the Atlantic hurricane season, which would actually put it more in line with where it is. But, with everything, the National Hurricane Center is obviously cautious about doing those things because it doesn't really affect anything. I mean, it's not like storms can't form before the
We told
human
you to wait until
deadline,
June. You're
but
early.
there are things that come into play with that. Like I know in the state of Florida and many other states in the US that are prone to getting hit with them, there are, tax-free holidays on hurricane supplies that usually coincide with the beginning of hurricane season, like that first
Oh,
week.
yeah.
And those things would move as well. And there's always going to be those people that go, "Ew, why are you moving it? Climate change isn't real," blah blah blah, all of that.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
the point is, it's a good question, but hurricane season really wouldn't affect when the pace at which they want to go here.
Right. Yeah, so they want to go fast. And yes, they want to beat the storms, I would say.
Yeah.
Musical Wolves said, I landed from orbital altitude and all I got was a swimsuit. SN20
Oh,
splashdown. So,
SN20,
so,
yes. Oh, I like that.
that must be a suggestion for a t-shirt or something.
All I got was that or like all I see, like if we would have had the shop when the Falcon 9 booster did the abort landing into the Atlantic right off the coast of Florida
Yes.
on SN16, and they literally went out and attached swimmies to it, like
Right.
floaties, like and man, that would have been a good shirt. I launched a cargo mission to the station and had to be outfitted with floaties because I couldn't swim.
Oh,
That was
that's
so much
great.
fun. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Musical Wolves. That's a great suggestion for a shirt. Let's see. John Hart. I don't know if we're looking at what they were looking at earlier. Okay, so what are the things on the pillars to the left of the close-up view? Looks like there are 2 out of 4 installed with 2 empty pillars. See, and problem is this is from 30 minutes ago. Do you happen to remember what John is talking about?
Oh, I was texting the boss and not paying attention.
Oh, yeah. What are the
John
things
Hart.
on the?
I'm not
Oh,
sure what
sorry.
he's talking about.
What are the
Yeah,
things
sorry we
on
didn't
the?
get to the question earlier.
Because
This
it's
is
specific to where we were. Yeah,
yeah,
sorry.
pertaining to where the camera was pointed at the time.
I could rewind
Um,
the stream 30 minutes and see what we were doing.
yeah, if you can do that without it being too much trouble, maybe we can come back to it. Okay, so I don't know. I'll copy this so it's not like up on the screen the whole time. Okay. Michael Kevin says, are those elevator shaft sections in front of the jig? And again, I
There's
think
the
this is
elevator shaft sections in
this.
front of jig.
Yeah, and this is
Yeah, that might have been. I mean, it would not surprise me if sections of the elevator were starting to be present, right? Because as you start adding sections to the tower, you can start outfitting, the
yeah on the
sections below
inside.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah, so there is some stuff that you can do in parallel as the sections are being stacked
and really
together, right? It's not like all of them have to.
now's
Coming
probably
back
the
to
best
sections.
time to get
And those
that
are, I
elevator.
think he's right. Those are the elevator sacks we saw earlier. They're not in frame right now, but earlier there were a bunch of metal trusses in front of the camera, and I believe that was the elevator.
Okay, cool.
So
Yeah, there you
good
go.
spot, Michael
Yeah.
Kevin.
Okay. Thomas and Fang says, I'm worried about super heavy rutting early in flight. If it did rut early on, it'd be like detonating a small nuke near South Padre, like a larger N1. I don't know if it's that big.
There's a lot of propellant, but it's not gonna be like this is actually something where like I really dislike how people I really dislike that this thing became the way that we equate what it would be like if a rocket failed.
Yeah.
Um, because it's you know, when the term small nuke is used to describe the blast, right? We're only talking about the energy release. There's no radiation. There's none of the other, oh my gosh, deleterious effects of like a nuclear weapon,
Yeah.
right? Or something like that. But it it's also, like the blast radius of the two is nowhere close to being the same,
Yeah.
right? So if it what you're primarily worried about with a rocket that would fail close to the ground is you do the analysis of if it were to fail like that, right, and really suffer that catastrophic failure, that assumes it's an explosion. That's the other thing. A lot of rocket failures aren't explosions. Some of them are, not all of
Mhm.
them. Um, and that does have a difference in terms of how the propellants are burning and reacting with one another and the force of the blast, right?
Yeah.
But basically you do that analysis, and what you're doing is you're doing that analysis for every single moment of flight. Right. And you're watching on the ground on the day, you're taking wind speed into account and all of that. And you're watching and seeing if something happened, where might material land. Right. But that ground footprint is what gives you the keep out zone of don't come closer to here.
Yeah.
Right. And that ground zone moves further offshore very, very quickly as the rocket performs its pitch program and begins the downrange trek, right? So, it wouldn't be raining things over South Padre Island. It wouldn't be exploding with a force of a small nuclear bomb in that regard. It is something we take into account, but it's not the that's part of why Boca Chica was picked, just like the Kennedy Space Center and Cape were picked for that reason, right? If the Saturn V ever blew shortly after liftoff or on the launch pad, you had you had to be far enough away to protect the public. And this one is as well, right? We're not going to see,
Right.
like people being told to get out of their condos in South Padre because there's a Starship about to launch.
Yeah.
Right.
But
You
I
know, and
mean,
if as it's going down its flight path, I think some people might get the idea that like if it explodes, then a lot of those pieces are going to go out perpendicular to its flight path, but it really doesn't. It continues with that forward momentum. It will,
Yes.
go out to the sides some, but for the most part, it's all going to stay contained and moving in that forward momentum. So
Right.
it's
Now,
not
is
like
there
if it's just south of South Padre and it blows up right there, it's not going to just suddenly shoot out left and right and rain down on South Padre. It's going to shoot out a little, but it's going to mostly maintain that forward momentum.
Exactly. And now I know a lot of people are probably saying, but Chris, pieces of one of the SS whatever made it to South Padre Island.
Loaded, yeah,
Right.
that was
Yes, they did. And that is a very different scenario, right? The starships on their suborbital up and down high altitude test flights that they've done so far don't gain the type of momentum that we're talking about for orbital launches, do not pitch out on that same trajectory out over the water. So there isn't that downrange velocity component to their flights. So when the one that everyone's thinking of where debris did make it to the ground or pieces of it did make it to the ground in South Padre, it was also hovering. Right. So if
right,
things come off of it, that's a very different upper level wind dynamic than a vehicle that is constantly accelerating, hitting the speed of sound by about a minute and a half, a minute and 20 into flight, and is already, 10 kilometers downrange from the launch site when
right.
it does that versus Starship, which was at 10 kilometers hovering before it began a belly flop. So very, very different scenarios there in terms of why we're saying, yeah, debris reaching South Padre from a launch failure in terms of falling from the air, very unlikely. Now, debris washing ashore, certainly.
Sure.
And if that ever
Yeah,
happens, don't touch it. Like,
yeah,
well, I would say debris is not what concerns me. It's the blast breaking windows that
right.
is
which
probably the
could be a
biggest
problem.
concern. And I
Right.
will note, um, the FAA has not approved any sort of super heavy launch from Boca Chica. So until that happens, there's always a risk the FAA could say no, this is not safe. I am assuming that SpaceX probably is somewhat confident it can get approval if they're building all this infrastructure, but the FAA has not approved it, and there is a chance that SpaceX could be forced to submit another environmental impact statement before this thing launches. The FAA is currently in the process of determining what sort of environmental approval, if any, is going to be necessary before SpaceX can launch Super Heavy. And it is possible that depending on what the FAA requests, it could be quite a long process. So that is probably the critical path right now for a Super Heavy launch.
Yeah. But eventually, we'll get this going, y'all. Don't get upset. We'll get Starship and Super Heavy off the
Yeah.
ground at some point. Uh, oh yeah, what I was thinking before. You were talking about the windows breaking and stuff. I'm sure most of our viewers remember Chelyabinsk. What was that?
Oh.
2013 was it?
13 or 14? Which one was that? I know
Yeah.
exactly what you're talking about. Keep going. I'll
Yeah,
find the date.
and so there were so nobody got killed, which is great. The asteroid comes in and explodes up in the atmosphere, and of course, there's a big blast that goes out, and people were injured by shattered glass, and the reason
Yes.
is because something something bright happens outside. What do? You go to the window, you don't know what it is.
Yeah.
You just saw something bright, and then the blast gets to you later. So, light obviously travels faster than sound or a blast wave, and that's why people were getting injured. And so it is a real concern because if there's something
Right.
bright that happens outside, your tendency is going to be to go to the window.
But in this case, and it's a great example, right? Exactly. So a couple things that work in favor here is one, most people would already be outside. If the Starship, I would
True.
hope, if you're within visual range on South
Yeah.
Padre Island, you would not be watching it on a television screen if you
Yeah.
can help
Right.
it, and would go outside. But I mean that particular one, right? Um, is a good case of like why we would be, worried for things like that. I'll give a slightly more analogous one after this, but that particular meteor, the Chelyabinsk meteor that came in on February 2013, it was exploded with the force of 30 times the atomic bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima.
Whoa.
This is, a Starship is nowhere close to that,
Right.
right? But that's what that meteor asteroid did, breaking up at 29 kilometers in altitude above the ground, and it still blew with that much force. And and
Yeah.
and of course, what people weren't expecting, what people who knew what had happened were expecting was because you can hear some people in those videos yelling, "Get away from the windows! Get away from the windows!" and others not paying attention to it.
Yeah.
But to see there are some videos on YouTube that are worth going and looking at in terms of what a rocket can do. There was a proton rocket failure from I believe it was Baikonur
Yeah,
several years
Baikonur.
ago. The one where they put the inertial
Accelerometer.
measurement units,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
they put half of them on upside down, so half
Yeah.
the rocket thought it was going the wrong direction. When it hits the ground, there are videos of people filming it from the launch area, like from Baikonur, and the windows shattering from the force of it falling back to Earth. But again, that was more, it fell back to Earth and blew on the ground. And a lot of these things with rockets have to do with exactly what the failure is. Because a lot of times the propellants are just sort of, when the tanks get breached, the propellants just sort of rapidly burn. But because the pressure has been released in the tanks, it's not an explosion like we think of an explosion being.
Right.
So all of those things sort of play into it, but it's a good question, right? And
Yeah.
and obviously we talked about it for 15 minutes and all the nuances of it.
Okay, Taylor Van Camp says, just wanted to say hi and thanks for what y'all do day in and day out. I hope y'all are having a good day. Hashtag Steven Fan Club, hashtag Chris Fan Club. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate the support, and that's a name I see a lot, so we appreciate you always stopping by. And Rough Riders Show, whoa, with a $50 super chat. Thank you, Rough Riders. Wanted to give a special shout out to Mary for giving me a small tour the other day at Starbase. Oh, that's cool. After standing out there all day, I truly get what she goes through every single day. Thank you, Mary and the NSF team. Well, thank you very much, Rough Rider Show. That's another regular around these parts coming in, showing some support and helping us out, following along. Let's see. Let's get back to some at NASA spaceflight questions. You can still hit us at NASA spaceflight. There's a lot of them coming in. We're going to try to get to as many as we can. This one I queued up a while ago, and I think we answered the question, but it's been a while now. So Ian wanted to know how tall each segment of the tower is, and I think we figured it up to be like, well, I'm gonna say 70 feet because I don't know the metric. Anybody, real quick?
I think
It was
60 approximately. It depends if it's 7 or 8 segments. So the estimate, I think we've seen is 7 to 8 of these segments being stacked, but uh, we're
I
not
think
sure if it's
the
7
number
or
that
8.
the number I came up with was like 67 feet, but I don't know that in
it's roughly
metrics.
21 meters.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so there you go. Ian Olson wanted to know, could a launch tower / bay ever be built underground at a depth of up to 500 feet?
Put a
So
launch tower slash bay. Oh,
I know it
yes, they're called
happened. I know it's a
they're called intercontinental ballistic missile silos, and they
right.
exist all the way around the world. Oh yeah, rocket pads can be built underground. All of the intercontinental ballistic missiles used by militaries around the world use silos.
I'm
Um,
gonna I'm gonna show
yeah.
my age here. One of my favorite games growing up was GoldenEye 007 on Nintendo
Oh
64,
yeah. Oh
and
wow. One of those
and
original like games I had.
yeah,
I remember that.
and
You didn't take
one of the levels was called Silo, and you were going
it. Mm-hmm.
between the different silos with these intercontinental continental ballistic missiles in them, and
Yep.
that was really my introduction to that. I didn't even know what it was. The first few times I played that, I was like, "What is this? What a silo? It looks like a
Yep.
rocket." And I was like, "Oh, they launch these things from underground." So
And
shout
they are
out to my
places.
GoldenEye fans out there.
Oh yeah, and they are places where you drive by, where I guarantee you a bunch of you have driven past them and have no idea they're there.
I used to live in Montana for a few years when I was a
Lots
kid.
of them are there. Yes.
Yeah, and I can't remember if it's North Dakota or South Dakota, but there's supposedly a bunch there. Like,
hmm
it's not like you can
Those
just look them up on
South
Google
Dakota.
Maps, but
No.
yeah. And I drove across those states a lot because I used to drive back and forth between Tennessee and Montana, and
Mm,
you don't see any
there's
sign of it. It's beautiful country,
no,
but
gosh, no.
see no sign of any sort of rockets or missiles or anything out there.
There was a very famous case. I won't go into detail, but it's worth looking up. One of those with the old Titan rockets, the old Titan II rockets, which used to
Mhm.
launch the Gemini crews, in Arkansas, that had a really bad problem with an active nuclear warhead on top of it. And yeah, that could have been really bad, and
Yeah,
most of the people living right around it had no idea. So yeah, go look it up. It's really
yeah,
cool, but that is a massive digression from what we should be talking about, so I won't do
right.
it.
Okay, let's see. Pan says the second section has little brown boots on. What are they, and why doesn't the first section have them? And even though this question is from a while ago, we can still see one of what he's talking about on the screen right now. I think,
Is
right? This
that far
this brown
leg?
section.
Sorry, is that far leg
Yeah,
being lifted?
It looks like it. I see
I
gap.
think it is. Yeah, are they referring to like the different color, like the base that they're removing it from? Why does the other section not, why does the section already there not have the same base?
I think so.
Yeah, so because the base you're looking at, so only the gray steel structure is what's going to get lifted here. The browner steel or iron or whatever it is, I don't know.
Might just be rust. I don't
Construction, it's something's rusted. Yeah.
know.
Is just the base that they put it on to move it from where they build it out to the production site. So it won't have that. Now, if we were to zoom out a little bit, you can see that the tower sections themselves all have little like you can see the tower that's on the concrete stand and already attached has like little hands that reach up from the top, right? And the section about to be lifted has that too, right? There are little like baskets around the four main posts at the top, and those are to provide scaffolding and access for the lower sections to actually join the sections together as they go up, but only the top part of each section needs those. So that's why only the top section has those. And what you're seeing at the bottom is just the moving rig
But
for
yeah,
it.
this thing is being lifted right now. We can see the gaps forming
Yep.
between the jig and the steel structure of the launch tower segment. So we'll watch what happens, but this is going to be the
Woohoo!
first
Yeah.
lift of the launch tower. The original section you can see on the launch tower right now was assembled on the foundation. So this is the first segment that was pre-built at the production site to be lifted into place.
Very cool. And this,
Yeah.
do you call this the string that's attached there? Is that called a guideline or a guy line?
I think it's a
A
guideline, right?
tagline.
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 Okay, and that kind of helps them keep it oriented the way they want, right? It looks like it's attached right there where those two trusses are coming together. Is that? Do I have that right?
Yeah, I
I
think
wonder
so.
if like once they get it up off the ground, is it already oriented in the direction that it will be once it's up top, or do they need to spin it around?
I believe it's oriented correctly, so all they're doing is picking, dropping, or it's at
Okay.
least oriented that if they have to swing the crane, it matches. But I think that's how they're doing it.
Yeah.
They look very much aligned in other angles. It's hard to tell on this one,
Mhm.
but they look aligned on other angles.
Okay. Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, it's. I imagine that they'll probably pick up the pace once they get clear, right? I don't think it's
Ye-
not going to be like an inch per minute. I don't think, surely, because I know I've
Well,
watched them lift Falcon
it
9 in
is
the port.
technically docking.
Well, yeah, you want to go slow, but once it's clear, then it should have the freedom to go ahead and pick up the
I think,
pace.
yeah, I think the actual like lift would be at pace, right? And then getting it over and getting it into position is when we'll see them slow down again.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Oh, you know what, Pan? I
Although it
never.
looks like there's still one bolt connected here.
Yeah, there goes that lift
They're
potentially
going
lifting
to
that
it
back
now,
through.
yeah.
Okay. I wonder why they went ahead and did that. Like went ahead and started lifting before all the bolts were clear. Maybe just to put tension on the line.
Maybe,
Uh,
yeah. We always know from constructing things or trying to take things apart that applying pressure or like pulling something a little bit to relieve pressure can make all the difference.
that's
So,
true. Um, okay,
it's
let's hit
just
a
so easy to
question
get
here.
lost. Yeah, questions. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Let's see. Wesley wanted to know, will the Starship launch at LC-39A at KSC? And the answer there, as
Um,
far as we know, is
there.
yes.
Yep, as far as we know, the answer is yes. I mean, it to me would strike me as great synergy to launch your HLS lunar starship for NASA from the big moon pad. But
Absolutely.
I mean, wouldn't that just be cool though if the lander launches from 39A and then the crew follows from 39B? Like
Yes.
that would be
Oh, that
cool.
yes,
Like
that'd be
using
very
the
cool.
two pads back in moon operation mode would be
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah.
And the crew could watch their lunar lander launch, because I
Yep, because it goes first. Yep.
yeah, it's going to go first. Now, there is going to be a little bit of time, because it's got to get there and they've got to determine that it's stable and ready to go. Of course, they've got to do the refueling and all that stuff. So it's
Yeah.
not going to be like one launches one day and then the crew launches the next day.
Nope. No. It'll be a little while because the Starship will. Sorry, the lunar Starship will have to launch, get itself into Earth orbit. It will have to have a few refueling. tankers meet it for what it needs to be able to do, and then it will get itself onward to the near rectilinear halo orbit where the Orion will meet it. And then once it's there and checked out and they know it's there and good to go, then Orion follows.
The refueling missions, I guess we'll call it. It's going to be interesting because I wonder if they'll be doing both from Boca and from Kennedy, launching their refueling tankers.
It could.
Because
The
they kind of
refueling
want to get
tankers could
that done.
also. Yeah, the refueling tankers could also be sea launch platforms, sea launch platform launches, in order to, especially if it becomes a moment of like they'd like to get as many up as possible, or even like this is what's very interesting of how the resupply is going to work. Like I could also see them launching a Starship, getting it up there, and then sending all the refuel flights up first, getting a Starship tanker with enough fuel on orbit, then launch the lunar one from 39A, if that's what they're going to do, um, and then immediately rendezvous the tanker with Lunar Starship, do the docking, do the propellant transfer. That way, it's only one docking and propellant transfer to your lunar ship. Send the Lunar Starship out to lunar orbit. I mean, that's a way to lower your overall timeline from once the lunar version of the lander is launched.
And risk.
Then well,
If you
and
only have
risk,
to,
yeah, because if
yeah,
you can only do it once, yeah, that's a lot less risk, especially
you just
transferring
blew
as
my
much
mind.
propellant as we're talking about.
I
Yeah, I mean
hadn't thought
there
of
are
that at
all
all.
these
That's a brilliant idea.
yeah, there are all these cool ways that the refueling effort could happen. I admit that my first thought was, oh, they launch it and then they send up the tankers, but no, like you could actually pre-position the tankers in orbit and
We do
then just
have
wait for it.
we do
Oh,
have some breaking news. I'm afraid it's
Yes,
not
indeed.
good news in my opinion, but the
Uh-oh.
a self-propelled modular transporter has arrived at the launch site, and unfortunately, it is carrying a Starship transport stand, which means SM-15 is probably going back to the build site and potentially may not be flying again.
Yeah.
boom, 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 boom.
But before we show you that, we have crane assisted takeoff
Yeah, we do.
Yeah,
from
I
the
that
better
see. I
news
last
is
see
the
pillar.
launch
daylight.
Yeah.
tower is in the air, but the bad news is SM-15 may also soon be in the air.
For the
We
last
have
time.
liftoff. Yes.
Oh, that's. Oh, yeah. There we go. Oh, yeah. We're picking up the pace now.
Yep.
Oh, look at it go.
Yes, indeed, we do liftoff of the launch tower.
Yeah. All right. Tell your friends it started. It has begun. You know
Has
what?
begun.
It has begun. Um,
Yeah, no, that's the movie I thought of. Like,
yeah.
exactly.
Um, I don't know. Since we're just kind of, I kind of want to watch this for a second. Let's have a little fun and see where everyone is watching from. Go, take it
Yes.
away, chat.
Yeah, let us know where around the world you are watching from as the first mobile section of the tower is lifted up.
And here we go. I saw Quebec, Houston. I thought I saw Burger King.
Oh, you
St.
never know.
Louis, Earth, Germany,
Lunchtime.
France, Germany again, England, Kentucky, UK, north of Boca Chica, Paris, New
Oh,
Jersey,
nice.
Arizona, KFC, Switzerland,
I love. Did you say KFC? Like
KFC. That is what I
the
saw. Yes,
chicken place? Okay,
yes, yes. Ireland, Canada, Ireland, Georgia,
yeah.
Texas, Michigan, Iowa, Texas.
Fan. Oh, I
Uh,
love this.
yes, I'm seeing more fast food joints popping up. Someone said I'm at Elon's. Czech Republic, Mars, Tennessee. Hey, Tennessee. Norway, Brazil, Uruguay, Austria, India, Mexico, Norway, Denver, Florida, Minneapolis. Oh man, they just keep on coming. Like it's so fast I can't see. Malaysia, Venus,
I love
Utah.
it. How many people do we have watching right now?
16,000.
Nice.
16,000 of you guys wanted to watch a tower take flight. Thank you for
And
being there. We appreciate it.
like we said, it's going to be several of these segments. So the taller the tower gets, the more exciting the lift will be. So I have a feeling this will not be our first and only lift stream. I think we will likely stream several more.
Sounds
Yeah.
like it.
Yeah. Hey, it's
Sounds
exciting. Anytime anything leaves the ground, it's exciting. It doesn't matter what it is.
Oh, I was just gonna say too. Like this is just totally reminds me of like playing Kerbal Space, and you pick up your launch tower segments in the VAV, and you have to
Yeah.
stack them.
Is this
Wait.
crane going to drive right in front
Except
of us?
there's no
Oh no.
right.
Launch tower. I don't think I've ever used a launch tower in Kerbal.
Oh, there's a mod. I don't use it very often, or but there's a modular launch towers in
Oh,
KSP that gives you a whole bunch of other things. Thankfully, that crane stopped.
No, it did not.
No.
what are you
Oh
doing, Red Crane?
dear.
Oh.
This is like when they were demolishing that stadium in Atlanta, and the bus pulled in front of stopped in front of the camera
The camera.
just in time, so the entire explosion was missed. An implosion was
Oh,
missed. Yeah,
yes.
I mean,
Oh, that's so
perfect
painful.
timing. Yes.
Oh man, and he's so angry, but like it's just at the situation, It's not like the bus did it on purpose.
I love that. It's just the situation. No, because
Yeah.
that's what was great about it. The bus driver didn't do it on purpose, and like as soon as they realized, they were like, "Oh!" And you can see the moving, but it was done at that
It
point.
was
I mean, it was
over.
so perfect.
It was
Yeah.
so worth it for the memes, though. I think that
Yeah.
It
bus driver's
was.
a hero.
Yes. It gave
Hey.
whole new saying to that like term, "Move that bus,"
Yeah.
that they scream on that one reality show or whatever. Like,
This
anyway, we
crane is moving
digress. There's
quickly,
the
to be
moment.
fair.
Yes. At least it's a crane and not the crawler transporter.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks like it's just gonna move right through. That's fine. You can do your thing. We approve. Let's see. Let's hit some questions. What do you say? Will SN20 have Raptors on it, and if so, will they fire up? Lots of love from India. Oh, there's another place
Oh,
watching.
yes. So SN20 for the orbital flight, yes, definitely. SN20 will have to have Raptors for the orbital
Either
flight, because
that or
after the
a really big crane.
well, maybe the crane's just a catapult and it just throws it
Yeah,
into
one
orbit.
of
No,
those slings.
no, all joking aside, yes, SN20 will have to have Raptors, a we believe full complement or fullish complement of them underneath, because this is an orbital attempt. So the booster will also have a full complement of Raptors. The SN20 will also have Raptors because it needs to ignite after the second stage burn after the first stage ascent burn ends about what is it, Michael? 2 minutes 50 seconds into flight or something like that is the burn time for the super heavy. Um,
Yeah, but I'm
after
not. Okay, quick comment. I will say that SEC document is not entirely accurate on a lot of things I've heard, so don't read too much into that SEC document.
Right, but
After that.
right, okay, but the overall large point is that the Starship itself has to have Raptors installed on it, because if you just did the super heavy flight, you wouldn't even be close to orbit.
No, correct.
Um,
That is definitely
so
correct.
you
Yeah.
have yeah, so you have to have Raptors regardless of what the flight profile ends up becoming. You would have to have Raptors to continue the journey to either get you fully orbital or leave yourself potentially intentionally suborbital, so that if the Raptors encounter a relight issue, we don't have a Chinese stage problem, with the added benefit of the steel can survive atmospheric reentry. So it just ultimately depends on what the flight profile ends up being that's approved by the FAA in terms of like how many, but they seem to be like hoping that this is like a full up test. So I wouldn't be surprised if the goal is to have a full complement of Raptors on each. But again, that can change as the initial test flight objectives change and alter. But Starship will definitely have to have them one way or another.
Yep, for sure.
Let's see. Dale Needham says, expecting the first few boosters to drop to land to have some sort of legs, even if one use only, until they get the accuracy nailed, then remove to increase payload. I think this might have been referencing what we were talking about earlier, like how do you test landing a super heavy booster?
It might, except they are not going to, at least per the current FCC plan, or sorry, plan filed with the FAA, they're not gonna even, they're gonna attempt soft splashdown
FCC,
of
yeah,
the
FCC.
booster. FCC, yeah, they're gonna attempt. I believe that's in the FCC permit, right, Michael?
Yeah, but
There's
I don't
there's
think
not a
yes. I have heard things that suggest the FCC thing that was filed is not super accurate. I mean it's
Gotcha.
with the FCC. So the FCC, all the FCC cares about is these are the frequencies the rocket's going to be using
Right.
and the very general flight plan. The FAA is the agency that's going to care about every minor detail. So people have been trying to, well, it says touchdown for the booster and splashdown for the Starship. What does that mean? If you're reading into it at that level of
Right.
detail, those technicalities are not specifically accurate, and SpaceX's plans are evolving quickly, and the FCC is not going to care whether a booster splashes down or, crash lands or lands on a vehicle or a pad or a drone ship, whatever, unless it affects frequencies. So don't read into the document too much. It's the TLDR.
Now, what's happening here? Are they lowering it back down to the ground, or is it still just hovering over? It looks like it's lower to
It's
me.
lower. It is lower because it was before the top of it was sort of level with the existing tower segment.
Yeah.
Surely they're not going to set it on the ground.
I don't know.
I mean,
Oh, they're
based on
rotating
what
it.
it looked.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
the
okay.
rotating. Look at that. Okay.
Okay, I was gonna say based on what it looked like when it came off the ground, I don't think they can set it back down aside from on that transporter because like there's a bottom support V structure that comes down
Yeah, I think you're
um
correct.
from it. So if they're just rotating it, that would make sense.
Well,
The
that
roll
answers the
maneuver.
question from earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, because earlier I was looking at the two segments side by side, and it looked like their staircases didn't line up. So that's sort of why I was.
There we go.
Yeah.
There we
Well,
go.
well, very cool. Let's see.
Well, and that's
Let's.
important. You want your staircases to match.
Yeah, yeah. You get up to the fifth floor or whatever, and it's like, wait a minute, what I gotta climb from here on out?
Yeah, well, hey, acrobatics, man. The
Yeah, yeah. Okay, we've got a.
suddenly that dreaded day in PE made sense.
Yeah, the dreaded day. I never had to climb the rope or anything like that. I see that
Oh,
pop up in movies,
mercifully,
and
I
I'm like,
didn't either.
I never had to do that. Okay, so we've got a new member, HJB8376. Thank you for the membership. And now, real quick, for those that don't know, what does the membership get you? I know you get like special emojis you can use in the chat and stuff. I think you also, at a certain level, you get access to a special Discord for our members, right?
Yeah, Capcom and Higher gets access to the Discord. It's like that so that you can actually hang out with us. If it was a free-for-all Discord, there'd be 10,000 people in it, and you wouldn't actually be able to interact with us. But it's
Yeah.
structured so that our most dedicated community members can actually hang out. But the red team level also has early access to Mary's video clips. So there's different levels, different perks depending on the level. So if you click the join button, you can read more about what each level entails.
There you go.
And that section is definitely on its way higher now again.
Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, Mike Smith. Mike Smith spent $20 to say when tower hop. And the answer is now. Tower hop is nigh. James James Powers said, "Do you think we'll see a Falcon use the OLIT for AI practice?" What?
Do you think? Okay,
The,
okay. Put that up on the screen so I can see the
yeah.
acronyms.
Orbital Launch Integration Tower for Artificial Intelligence
No.
Practice. AI, is that what AI stands for?
Yeah. So this goes back to the conversation we were having about the software logic and the AI, right? The software logic that's used as the vehicles are flying themselves and like the decisions that they are capable of making. Like I'm descending toward the target landing area, but I see something that might be a hazard, so I'm gonna divert 20 meters, 10 meters over here,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. And we were sort of talking about how, eventually what that system has to account for is that there is going to be a tower there, there are going to be structures there. And just like the Tesla um, software logic and what it's allowed to interpret and decide in terms of actions to take, it needs to be aware that that tower is there, that it's going to be getting closer, the tower is going to be have moving components to it, and all of that needs to be accounted for in the software logic so the booster doesn't think something is amiss and fly itself away to safety. In that regard, though, no, the Falcon 9 is almost completely and utterly useless for that, even though I see, how like, oh, well, they have a rocket, they should be able to use that rocket. It's so much smaller, it's so much skinnier. It's not what this is sized for. So you almost need something Starship's size to be able to work with how all of those systems are going to interact with one another and
Yeah.
actually work.
Yeah. So Falcon
Yeah,
9
unfortunately,
can't do
really
it.
the thing. Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, the Falcon 9 can't isn't helpful with like practicality testing. Where the Falcon 9 is invaluable and has given them a massive head start is when it is time for the boosters and starships to do, especially the boosters, to do their thing and come back to the and either fly them and fly themselves to wherever their landing location is and recovery location is after launch, is that's basically just a big old Falcon 9 coming in at a very similar trajectory at a very similar angles to how the Falcon 9 uh, paths are currently flown and that they have a lot of experience with. So that's definitely going to help in terms of the software that the booster is using, obviously making sure everything is configured properly for Starship, but that experience base is going to be invaluable in terms of how the booster is flying itself back to these recovery sites.
Yeah. Okay, pressing on. Pickled Tripod wants to know, is the Franken crane really tall enough to stack the launch tower, or are we expecting a bigger one? Well,
Nope,
again, this,
not yet.
but we're thinking they're gonna add segments to this, to the crane, right?
Yes,
Am
it's
I,
an LL 350, a Liber LL 350. I said the wrong model earlier. I'm correcting myself now. It's a 11,350, excuse me. But the maximum height of the crane is about 490 feet tall, so it can be extended much higher.
um, Cody Coker has sort of a philosophical question. How do you justify the environmental and financial costs of going to Mars to the non-believers? I've been having this debate with my family for days now. That is a
Easiest
yeah.
way I would do it. Yeah, and what I normally say when people get upset about the cost is not $1 of that is being spent off this planet. That money is being spent providing jobs and livelihoods and investment in technology that is translatable to other industries and other services. Not one part of that is being spent off planet. It's
Yeah,
all
we're
being
not
spent
throwing
right
cash into
here,
space.
exactly, and so much of it will that we are seeing here in the development. I mean, not specifically the tower section that you're seeing here in front of us, but the overall system. Right. I mean, what they're developing, the processes for pulling carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere to make oxygen and methane as fuel, right, which is crucial for Mars, is also incredibly beneficial to here on Earth because what's the thing that we've been pumping into our atmosphere for hundreds of years? Carbon dioxide.
Right.
What is it that's leading to that? Well, if we can have rocket technology that by necessity is driving the innovation of those, carbon capture systems out of the atmosphere here that then turn them into useful products that when burned, yes, there's a bit of carbon dioxide that is put back out into the atmosphere, but most of it's water.
Yeah.
Most of it isn't harmful, right? So like that's how I would say that, right? Like whether or not you believe that humans should have be a multiplanetary species or not, none of that is being spent there. It's all being spent right here. And, to the thousands upon thousands of people who are employed, to the other industries that stand to benefit this and the other jobs that exist because of it, I mean, those are livelihoods. And a lot of it is only here to help us.
Right. Yeah, I love that. That's a great way to answer that question. There you go, Cody. Take that to your family and see if they like that. See if they agree. Let's see. We've got
And if not, come back and we can talk about all the stuff that happens on the International Space Station
there.
that benefits us here.
Okay, it's either Chard or Shard, Loden or Loudon. Thanks for the great coverage. Do you know how far along Phobos and Deimos construction is? Are the towers being built yet? I don't know if the towers being built.
Deimos has not had any work done really. It's just kind of been sitting there. Phobos has had basically all the. It's been scrapped of all the old oil equipment. It's just basically a bare bones structure, and we're waiting to see what happens next.
Scuba says a 9-meter Starship stand on an SPMT just arrived at the launch site and is heading there now. SN-15 will not fly again. It's going back to the build site. Oh, well, we deduced that just now, just a little bit
They
ago.
sent that 40 minutes ago, so it
Yeah,
was probably news at the time.
it probably was. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry to be so far behind. I'm going to try to speed run these. We don't have too many more that are like double-digit minutes behind. Okay. Grant Huckstadt with two. I think that's Australian dollars. Just says hi. Hi, Grant. Oswin Fox or Foe. The term you want is believe boiling liquid expanding vapor explosion.
Oh, when we were talking about how
Yeah,
things fail, and yeah, and specifically how we have this habit of automatically calling everything that happens an explosion, right?
right.
If the vehicle disassembles itself, whereas a lot of times what you've seen in terms of in-flight rocket failures are not actually explosions per the technicality. They certainly look like it, but they're not. But that's yeah, exactly.
All right. Pebmets with $15. Thank you very much. Says, is there any reason why there appears to be no flame trench for Super Heavy? Even with sound suppression water system, there should be a flame trench to divert the flames and exhaust like shuttle. Yeah, we did touch on this a little bit earlier. So far, the plan is to not have a flame trench. But SpaceX, if they need to change their plans, they will. But if they can get by without it, then they'll do that too.
Yep.
Uh, Ronald Duty says, question, when they add higher sections to the launch tower, will they add more sections to the Frankencrane?
Yes.
And yes, yeah, the answer is yes there. Elkvis, Elkvis, I like that name. I'll bet this tower section will land more gracefully than SN 8, 9, or 11. Well,
Oh,
yeah,
I hope so.
yeah, very slowly.
if it, if it doesn't, or if it's on fire at the end of it, I have a lot of questions about what's
Right.
happening.
Beautiful. Let's see. Chasn DFW. I don't know. That's a GSE subcooling tank in the lower left. Two of the four have been installed. We're talking about the ground service equipment subcooling tank in the lower left. I don't. It might have
Oh,
been
the
looking at a
method,
different view.
the bottom left, those two. You can only see one on the screen right now. There are two of the I think they're methane subcooling tanks is what the hypothesis is.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Um, George Stathopoulos says, how much does each tower segment weigh? Best guess.
Ooh, I not even going to guess. I truly don't know, and it would be massively dishonest of me to try to guess. I really don't
I,
know.
I guess 3.
Aside from like a lot.
Yeah. Yes. 3 units.
3 units, yes.
Um, so we've got a few new members here. We've got Joseph Smith. Thank you very much for the membership. Prashant Singh. Thank you very much for the membership. And also Joey Cunningham, new member. And thank you. And that really helps us out to just to know that there are some people out there that are throwing some money our way every month. It's nice to have that kind of sustained income to help support all of this stuff that we're doing with the robot cameras and sending Mary out there and Jack and all this stuff, all the stuff that happens behind the scenes. It's not possible without that support.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially when
And
Starship
not
does not fly every month.
True. Yes.
Yes, and also for all of our other activities too. All the stuff here in Florida and in California, and over the weekend, I believe, Michael, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe we were the only organization that had a live stream of the Virgin Galactic flight.
It's the only
Over the
one I was
weekend, and
watching.
yeah, and deploying Jack for that out to New Mexico. Those channel memberships, everything that help us do all of that, and help us be, that global um, spaceflight community
And
as
heck,
well.
even just on the daily Starship videos and stuff, if you just
Oh
watch
yeah,
that
yeah.
ad, just if you just like I'll do it whenever I'm pulling up a video. It's like, okay, I guess I could sit through a 15-second or 30-second ad. I'll do it.
Ads are annoying, but they really, really do help us. So
They
yeah,
do.
just sitting through that little ad or that 15 or that 5-second skippable ad, everything like that, the channel memberships, the super chats, all of that helps. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Because simply just watching it and watching that ad help us. So thank you.
Right. This is a interesting question. Moogie38 said, "Will there be?"
Moogie, I love that name. Oh my god.
Well, is that
Okay.
what's the
Oh, I have
reference?
so
I
many
don't get
Deep
it.
Space Nine questions for you now.
Oh,
Okay,
Deep
yes.
Space Nine. Okay. Will there be an international space time as a Earth year is different to a Mars year? Love the live shows.
Oh,
Good
this is
question.
fascinating. A fascinating question. Yeah, it will be interesting to see how we handle this once it is not just the Earth and the moon. I think the idea of time is a lot easier when you're at the moon, and if we're talking about human habitation zones on on Luna, basically. Those I could see the Earth calendar and the Earth year obviously still works, and time can work because like the moon just rotates so differently, and a day lasts for 14. Yeah, it's all so fascinating on the moon, but it's close, right? And we can get used to that and design communication systems even on the far side, in terms of like a lunar communications constellation that would permit that sort of almost instantaneous um, transmission and communication between the moon. There's like a second lag or something like that, but I mean,
Right.
that's enough where it's near instantaneous to us. The trick, and this is where the question really becomes fascinating, is what to do about Mars. Um, Mars is it takes roughly twice as long for Mars to orbit the sun as it does the Earth. It takes the Earth 364. It takes Mars 668 or something like that. So just shy of 2 Earth years. Its day is 36 minutes longer than an Earth day. So like you can get out of sync pretty easily, but not noticeably because Mars's day-night cycles are actually really conducive to human settlement over there.
Yeah.
It's almost the same, like that extra who always says, "Oh, if I only had another hour in the day." Well,
Yeah.
move to Mars. You've got
You
36
get
extra minutes. Uh,
36. Yeah.
you know, But that's going to become something interesting, right? How w- what do you do if on your I mean, is it almost worth creating a different system and you have to coordinate the two? Is it worth doing what we do sort of with the rovers and control centers right now on Earth, where the Earth people just adjust themselves to Martian time? Because that's the only way you can do it. You can't be waiting for 12 p.m. Pacific time, right, for the rover to do something because it might be night where the rover is because there's a 37-minute day-to-day difference,
Right.
right? Whereas noon might be noon and the times might sync, but then 2 weeks later they don't. And it's the middle of the night for the rover. So you could do that. But yeah, we're gonna have to figure this out. And when we do, I'm all here for this because time is such a weird construction anyway. Uh, I mean, I personally am like a proponent of just like, could we please just all move to the same time on the Earth?
Yeah.
Like, can we just please all use UTC? I mean, who cares if I know that me adjusting it means, oh, 12 UTC is the wake up time and 13 UTC is or 1 p.m. is when I go to work, like we could do it. We've just trained ourselves that 8 a.m. means morning
Yeah.
and like, but I'm all here. I'm all for like a conversation of well, what do we do when we're a multiplanetary species and the planets are not the same in their rotation?
Yeah. I don't think it would take that long to get used to it. It's just like, the same thing with like switching to metric, like if people are like, no, you
Yeah.
can't, to, miles and feet. You would get used to it and it wouldn't take that long, actually.
No,
If
actually,
time,
I'm
everything, if it's all changed, you would get used to it. You would know that, oh, I eat lunch at 6 o'clock.
exactly, exactly, and like, so however we end up figuring this out for Mars, like, and Earth is going to be fascinating. But exactly what you just said, Stephen, right? It's like here in the U.S., if you were trying to teach yourself the system the rest of the world uses, um, which I did, and which I did, but I was really trying to think about like, well, how do I do it? Because like I had no conception of what a meter was or what a kilometer was, but if you told me foot and mile, I knew what that was,
Mhm.
or had an idea of how big that was. But about 2 years ago, I switched all my navigation apps, all my weather apps over to metric and
Oh,
Celsius,
really?
um, and just forced myself to learn it. And within 2 years now, like when you all were saying, oh, it's 70 feet, I'm like, I have like, I've lost the conception of what the imperial units are now. And it only took
Y-
2 years of just
You've done it.
immersing myself in it and like switched the car over too. So like it was in kilometers an hour. And when you immerse yourself in it, it's really easy for your brain to make that transition. And then one day you will just realize you don't know the other one anymore,
Right.
which is what I realized about last week.
I had to read this comment here. Mark Walker said, "The tower has cleared the tower."
Yes. Yes.
Brilliant.
Hand over to Crane 2 has begun, right? Oh
Um,
man, that's hilarious. I love it.
yeah,
Thank you,
that's
Mark.
great. Words in Ink said, "You'll have to have a new lift shirt now. Pick of Crane. Do you even lift, bro?" That's a good idea.
I love it. Yes.
Okay, a more serious question. Cookie Cam said, "Will the tower have a lift? Will there be a crane at the top of this tower?"
Yes, there
Yes.
will.
Okay,
Yes, and that's partly why the tower itself has to be a little bit taller than what they might need it to be if it was just the simple catch arm tower, like catch the booster and the Starship as they come back. Because there's going to be a crane on the top of it to lift the Super Heavy and the Starship. Then on top of the Super Heavy, your crane's minimum height therefore needs to be higher than Starship's tip, right? The tip of
right.
Starship, because by definition, it has to be taller than that in order to lift the base of Starship high enough to get it over Super Heavy and then place it down on top of it.
There you go. Mark Hamill said, "Greetings from a galaxy far, far away. Quick question: What is the tank stacked on the small pillar next to the two empty pillars in the bottom left of frame in the stream on
Oh,
the right?" Okay.
Yeah, the
yes.
community hypothesis, it's a methane subcooling thing. I have not confirmed that myself, but that's the community hypothesis.
Okay.
And just in case, because I always say it to the guy named Patrick Stewart on here, in case it's the real Mark Hamill, wish it were.
Hi. Hi, Mark Hamill,
But
the real Mark.
thank you to the Mark Hamill for the $10 super chat and the question. But I'll always hedge, and just in case it's the real one.
Yeah. I mean, it's a real one, probably.
Well,
Maybe.
yes.
But
Sorry, that came out totally wrong. Yes, the famous one we're all thinking of. There we
yeah.
go.
Let's see. Eric Torres says, "Are there plans to cover the splashdown for the orbital flight? Like for
As
us?"
far as I am aware, there is no plan for an NSF yacht at this time.
Now, isn't it? Didn't the FCC flight plan that we're not taking too seriously, but isn't it kind of close to where they did the Falcon 1 flights down near Kwajalein or something?
Falcon
Isn't
One.
that where the
No. The flight plans that got filed for the FCC, which again are the ones where we're saying like, take those with a grain of salt, as to how close it'll actually end up matching what the current plan is even right now. No, the booster would come back a few dozen kilometers off the coast of Boca Chica, so it would do like a boost back flyback thing.
I meant like the
But just
splashdown
not.
of
But right,
Starship.
right. But the Starship would be north about 100 kilometers north of the Hawaiian Islands,
Oh,
and I'm totally blanking on Kwaj.
yeah, Quad.
Yeah, Kwaj, because that's just the easier way to pronounce it. Is in the Pacific Ocean, like the island nation area of the Pacific Ocean. Um, on the Hawaii is like halfway across the Pacific Ocean, roughly from the west coast of the United States, and Kwaj is like another, however many thousands of kilometers away it
Yeah.
is. Basically, when they're flying stuff to Kwaj, they stop in Hawaii.
Oh, right. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
long way out there. Dylan Thomas says hi from Wales. Hello. Hi, Wales. Ciffer's Corner said, wait, send an unfolding landing pad to the moon. Oh, well, this is something that's kind of been talked about, as far as like stuff being kicked up on the moon, um, whenever they're landing, but they don't
Isn't
necessarily need to worry about because they have those thrusters that are up closer to the top that are far enough away from the lunar surface that it's not gonna kick up all the stuff and send it orbital like it would if they were landing on the Raptors.
right, and actually not just send it orbital, which would be bad in and of itself. The Raptors blasting the lunar regolith like that would be escape velocity from lunar orbit,
Oh,
and the lunar gravity field. So like it's bad. Like you do not use the Raptors,
yeah.
in that regard on lunar surface. But Michael, what am I remembering here? Wasn't there some bizarre, massively futuristic thing where like a starship there was something being talked about where the starship would basically create its landing pad on Mars as it came in or after it had landed the first time or something like that? Or is this some weird dream I'm remembering and I
There's
should just stop
the
talking?
Maston. Maston has a lander that has special propellant that, I think it's something that's added to propellant to make it create a landing pad as it lands, or it can like
There we
sort of
go.
paint a landing pad on the surface of Mars. But Starship does not have that capability.
Got you. Okay, so I was remembering something real, just not the correct system. Okay, well, I'm gonna take that as a score for memory.
You win.
Yeah.
uh,
Although, man, as I was saying it, it was one of those things that seemed so futuristic. I was like, was this a fever dream?
um, okay. Sumatra wants to know, is China doing something to fix their Long March 5 section so is no longer a concern for people? Ooh, Chris, do you know what they're referring to?
I don't think
Is China doing something?
I don't
Oh,
think we
okay. I know what
know.
they're. Yeah, so yeah, we don't really know, but what has been proposed. So this is specifically referring to the Shenzheng 5B, Long March, what it's sort of known as outside of China, but the Shenzheng 5B variant specifically. So this isn't a problem with the Shenzheng 5 itself because the 5 variant has an upper stage to it. So core stage is automatically left suborbital in that regard. And then the upper stage completes the orbit insertion for um, missions either beyond Earth orbit or or like missions to GT that they would want to use that vehicle for if they were massive. The problem with the 5B variant, though, is that they do away with that upper stage, that second stage, because the core can technically, just like SLS, get the vehicle fully orbital in some regards, especially these ones that are carrying station modules, where what they have done is they have basically put all of the lifting capacity of that second stage to barely get a giant station module in orbit. That then leaves the giant section in orbit, thankfully around 200 kilometers, where it comes in and decays very quickly, but because it's uncontrolled, it can drop wherever. As we've seen, one time it's come down over land, over Cote d'Ivoire, and another time it came down, and the second time it came down in the Indian Ocean. Now, there are easy things that could be done to this, right? Small rocket motors, like solid rocket motors, could be put onto this because it's not a huge delta V shift that you need to shove it down a little bit more into the atmosphere in a controllable way. So there are talks about, like, come on, like, either leave it suborbital and do a second stage or do something on the other modules to get them up there, or put a small rocket motor, because you really don't need much considering the low altitude it's dropping it off in. You don't need a lot of delta V to bring that stage in. So we hope, but there are certainly things they could do if they want to. I think it literally just comes down to they don't want to, sadly.
Yeah. Okay.
But prove me
Well,
wrong, China. Prove me
yeah,
wrong.
yeah,
Hopefully
please.
prove me wrong,
Yeah. James Powers spent $5 to say the weight of the segment is likely 42. And
I like that. Yes.
yeah. And yeah, and I trust James. James seems like the kind of person that knows things like this. So yeah, there you go, folks. 42. Um, I like this question. Will the booster ever land downrange? Talk about super heavy. Maybe for heavy geostationary direct insertion. Um, I they will land on Phobos and Deimos, but I think the spirit of the question might be more like, is it ever possible that they might come and land in Florida? Which, if that's the spirit of the question, I don't. That would
Yes.
be awesome,
Yes.
but I don't think
It,
that even could make it that far.
Yeah, it would be awesome. They are not capable of traversing across the Gulf like that when they are used during operational things. Don't get me wrong, that would be freaking amazing if they
Yeah,
could launch it from Texas and land it in Florida and then just go, well, I'm at my next launch location. Here I go,
yeah,
right? Like much like a
yeah.
plane, right?
Yeah, and never mind the overflying land, because obviously you would have to go over the entire state of Florida to get to the Cape. But I just don't.
Well,
It's
yes.
yeah, it's just not
Well,
possible.
now this is where things get interesting, and I won't get into too much of it, but like the environmental impact studies for launching starships out of Florida,
Hmm.
and super heavies out of Florida do include the environmental impact assessment for the sonic boom regime and what Central Florida could expect with a starship re-entering over the state as it heads for Florida. Now, whether or not they'll gain regulatory approval for such a flight, I don't know. But
Yeah,
again, we're more comfortable with things traversing over land during atmospheric entry than we are with this idea of point to point,
yeah,
for a rocket. So we'll see. We'll see.
yeah. We'll see.
And
Um,
Stephen, also just note the comment in the back channel not to call on me for a few minutes here.
oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah, good
Yeah.
thing you said that, because I did not notice.
Cool.
Okay, so Terry Heaton says you were talking about hurricanes earlier. I note that the launch tower at 39A is made the same way as this one. the Cape handles hurricanes. Well, right, it does. Yeah. I think we're talking about more than just the tower. But yeah, I think the tower itself is going to be fine with a hurricane. Maybe, might take a little bit of damage, but it's not going to topple, I don't think, because of a hurricane.
Yeah, the problem with a hurricane is going to be flooding at the
Right.
launch site.
Yeah. And Boca Chica is pretty low to the ground. Actually, they have a lot of marshland already just right there, don't they?
Yep.
Yeah, so it's definitely flood prone. I don't know, maybe they could engineer some flood walls or something to keep the water out of the production site and the launch area. Let's see. Pavel Curtis, we have a new member. Pavel Curtis, thank you very much for the membership. And the HJB 8376 is in the queue again, which means they likely upgraded their membership. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And Arthur Cardy, also a new member. I think I saw some others. Pushpack Elidu is also a new member. Thank you very much. Okay, Justin Miles said, glad to be watching with 15,000 fellow space geeks. Yes. Yeah, this is the best place to be. And actually, it's 21,000 space geeks now. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Let's see. Okay, JPC says, will SpaceX mean the end of the Imperial system?
That would be
Uh,
great, but I don't think so.
Yeah, I think it's going to take more than just space because SpaceX can use the metric system internally all they want, but it doesn't necessarily impact people outside of that world. Let's see. Keith Wells says, how many sections like this will SpaceX lift to finish the tower? And we think it's like 7.
Yep.
Yeah, pretty sure it's 7. Let's see. I always want to pre-read these just in case. Mike Henning says, relay satellite from SpaceX for communication with Marge Doge to Mars. Love the content, guys. Keep up the good work. And also thanks to Mary. Well, thank you, Mike. Yes. I don't know. Doge, who knows? Let's see. Oh, this is interesting. Reginaldo Camargo says, how do you guys believe the sports records will be compared to the Earth's records once we become a multi-planet species? Could it be possible we may need to add gravity in the mix? Well, I think what will probably happen is we'll just have 2 different scales. If we've got if we get to the point where there are enough people living on Mars that we like have sports competitions or or dare I say like a Martian Olympics or something, I think they'll just have to have uh their own records. They'll have the Martian Guinness Book of World Records or something.
We need to have an
Um,
astronaut hit a baseball or something on an EVA, so the ball just goes flying and never stops.
oh, it'd be so cool. Yeah. Yeah. Who was it that was it Alan Shepard that hit a golf ball up there on the moon? Do you remember?
Someone
It
hit
was
a
one of
golf
them.
ball on the moon. I forget which astronaut.
Yeah, somebody hit it. Yeah, it was like it was like some kind of a scooper or something, and he he used it as a golf club. Um, yeah, I think that there's there's lots of cool stuff like that
Yeah, it
that
was Alan
we
Shepard.
it was okay. There's lots of cool stuff like that to consider as we go forward and we become a multiplanetary species. Um, there's going to be a lot of those kinds of things to consider. It's going to be really interesting. We got to get there first.
But the
Uh,
tower is now, or the tower segment is now lined up with the tower. So hopefully
y-
this lift is going to go a bit faster here.
yeah. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, lined up. I wonder if, like, once it's down, if well, surely they're going to get right on bolting it, right? As soon as it's down, they just immediately start doing the bolting and stuff. Okay, so Colton Collingwood. Would SpaceX also have a CAA to lift onto the tower. What's a CAA?
Crew access arm.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, they'll
Probably
definitely need one.
eventually, if they actually end up launching crew from this very pad. I'm not sure if this is going to be a crewed launch pad yet. We'll see how it goes. Still a lot of things that have to happen before SpaceX starts launching crew, but it does remain to be seen if you're going to launch crew from Boca Chica, from 39A, from an oil rig. We don't know which launch pad is going to do what yet, but if they do launch crew from this pad, they will have to have a crew access arm for sure.
Right. And it looks like our staircases are lined up pretty well. So that's good news. You will be able to make your way to the top if the elevator's out of order. Okay. Pampalak said China is using only one time zone. People on the west of China are used to living 3 hours offset. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. So there's just one time zone for China, huh? And they all just adapt. That goes back to our earlier discussion about time. What does it mean? Okay, this is more about the metric thing. Okay, Ron I with $10 said, in 1975, the Transition to Metric Act was signed into law. Ask the department how we are doing. They'll say, we are inching along. Oh, that's funny. I thought I thought this was going to be like real information about converting to metric. Good punchline. Appreciate that, Ron. Taylor Van Camp said we must construct additional pylons. Yes, more pylons. Pylon the pylons. Oh, okay, yeah. John Ainsworth with $10 to say, what about Jack and his kayak for splashdown coverage? There you go. if if you start paddling now, Jack, you might make it out there in time. Caver Eric said SpaceX made it into Andy Weir's new book, Hail Mary. Have you checked it out? No, and I hadn't even heard of this new book. I knew about Artemis, but I didn't know that he had another one coming. That's really
I
cool.
did not know he named it after Mary. Wow.
Yeah, I had no idea. Yeah, what an honor. Andy Weir must watch the stream. Hey, Andy. Johan says, will lunar Starship need multiple refueling flights in a highly elliptical orbit? If so, how many? Your thoughts, Michael. This might be above my head. I don't know how
Yes, it
many
will
they would
need
need.
refueling flights. They will be done in low Earth orbit. I'm not sure if it will be elliptical or not, but there's going to be a depot Starship that they will fill up with several tankers, and then the depot Starship will be used to fill up the final HLS Starship to go to the moon. We are not sure exactly how many flights it's going to take. That's one of my biggest open questions, but hopefully we will get an answer soon, maybe at Elon's upcoming Starship update, which he mentioned on Twitter might happen, even though he said that several times and it has not happened in the past year. But fingers crossed we might get an update from Elon on SpaceX's plans for both the moon and Mars soon.
Right. Austin Inglis just says you won't. All right, I did. Thanks for the $5, Austin. Alexei Suslov said 42 in corncob units, please. I think we're still talking about the weight of each section. So 42 corn cobs. Let's see. Darwin says, I see some stairs within the launch tower, but do they plan on installing floors, elevator, wall panels? Elevator, yes. We do know that they've got an elevator. Floors at each level. I don't know. Would that be necessary? Does the tower at 39A have floors at every like stair landing?
That's a good question. I don't think so. But
I
there's
mean, if
definitely
there's
not. I don't think there's a reason to have floors at every level on this tower. I mean, you need access to the catch catching system. When you build that, you need access to potentially, if they have a way to load cargo from this or to load crew at some point, there need to be some sort of access arm, like we talked about, and then I'm sure they'll have access to the very top of the tower. They'll probably mount some cameras and whatnot at the top and some other sensing equipment. There's also going to be a lightning tower that they'll probably want access to. So at the key levels, there'll definitely be floors, but I'm not sure if it's going to be on every level.
Now it almost like I'm looking at like the trusses or yeah, I think that's what you call it. You know, like in the middle of each segment and the top level of the bottom segment, it's it's got more trusses. It almost looks like that is a floor.
Yeah, maybe they might have. They obviously have scaffolding on the outside, but they might have some scaffolding on the inside too, as they need places to work as they connect the towers together.
Okay. Aegon the Mad, no message, just $1.42. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. See, Chaz says hashtag wind tower belly flop. Hopefully never. Ryan Hamstra says Texas Tower Watchers T-shirt or hat. Well, you know, it might happen. I don't know. They may already be working on it. Sometimes we'll get surprised. Whoever whoever makes these designs will just be like, hey, look at this,
We do
and
need to
bam.
update our skyline shirt at some point, though, so that the
Oh
original
yeah.
Texas Tank Watcher shirt with that skyline might have to be updated at some point. We have updated that shirt several times in the past, and we continue to update our shirts with the latest skylines so that the older shirts kind of become collector's items, as you can remember, kind of the timeline of how things are built.
Roger that. Michael East with $5. No message, but thank you for the support. Josh Ritterhoff with the $10 says the thrust is 3, the height is 7, the weight is 42. Sounds like a T-shirt to me. My kind of crazy people. Love y'all. Robin says when we get to Mars, what would a calendar look like? Will the I don't know what they're trying to say. Will the dust add new months, or should we just create a new one?
I mean, Martian day is only slightly shorter than an Earth day, so
Slightly longer, I think,
so
isn't it?
slightly longer. Thank you. It's like 28 hours or something.
Yeah. And a
Um,
Martian year is like two.
oh,
What
it's
what was it?
37. Sorry, 24 hours 37 minutes. That's right.
Right.
But I don't know.
Yeah. It's.
We'll
I
worry
mean,
about these. We'll worry about these problems when they become a problem. I guess I would say.
yeah, exactly. I mean, like it's kind of one of those things. If you say it's December, you're used to it being, Christmas time and winter time, and on Mars it might not actually be winter time. It might just be something where you just have to get used to it, or we may invent a
Well,
new calendar. Oh, look, you're
well,
back.
so, well. Oh, I was just going to say too. Right here on Earth, your example of Christmas. 80% of the world associates that with winter.
Mm-hmm.
I beg to differ if you're from Australia, South
Exactly.
Africa, Argentina. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's all perspective. Yeah.
Right.
And
Um.
yes, hello back.
Welcome back. Um. All right, Michael East, just with a $5 super chat. Thank you very much. Appreciate the support. Um, okay, Mokita says, "How does SpaceX intend to build the other tower segments on top of it? Because Frankencrane isn't high enough, is it?" Well, Frankencrane will be high enough because I think that's where the Frankencrane came about, is because it is pieces of other cranes made to put together to make it taller, right?
Whether the crane model is designed to have different configurations, so they will put this crane model into a larger configuration for the upcoming segments.
Right. Right. Let's see. G key Qui 699. I don't know what is CA 699. What unit is that?
Canadian.
Canadian. Okay, Canadian
Canadian.
dollars.
Yeah.
You guys are amazing. Thanks. No, you're amazing. Um, all right. David Neubauer with $5 just to say I like chicken. Well, all right. um, okay. I like this. Jayanth with 100. I'm not sure what that symbol is. What's the biggest constraint in building a space station in space? Great work, guys. And I'm trying to throw that up there. Yeah. Okay. What unit is that?
Rupees, I
Oh, I
think.
do not. I do not know. Off the top of my head, what currency
I
denomination
think it's
that
rupees,
stands
right?
for. Maybe I don't. I honestly, yeah, I honestly don't know.
Yeah, it's a rupee.
What's the biggest constraint to building a space station? Well, money.
You gotta, yeah, getting
Um,
it there.
honestly, it money.
Because
There's
it's
nothing
not
that precludes
necessarily
the
like,
addition of new. Go
yeah,
ahead, Steven. Yeah.
it's not the engineering necessarily. I mean, we have a pretty good
No.
idea like how to make uh the like the segments of the space station. You know, we know how to make them
Mm-hmm.
airtight. You know, we know how to make them function. It's more a matter of the cost of it and also getting it all launched. You know.
Yeah, because there's nothing from a physicality standpoint. Like, I mean, depending on where it is, right? I mean, at some point it would just become more practical to build another one instead of just keeping adding on to one you've got, right? But I mean, like if you're in um, a stable solar orbit, right, where you don't have to contend with atmospheric drag, even, in at altitudes like the International Space Station, there's really nothing that would preclude it getting I mean, as big as you wanted it to. I mean, except eventually something would smack into it,
Yeah.
some rock, right?
Mhm.
But I mean, you could keep adding radiators and solar arrays and life support equipment and stuff like that. In Earth orbit, your size constraint is really going to be based around the initial idea behind the construction and how you do orbital reboost maneuvers because of Earth's atmosphere, even at heights above that of the International Space Station, your orbit will still degrade because of atmospheric drag and interference. So you'd have to design a system that at some point can be reboosted. So it's a good question, but honestly, right now, the answer is money.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I was realizing, and you may have already realized this when you were answering, but I was thinking, oh, I think they're talking about actually like sending up materials and constructing it
Hmm.
in space. Okay, yeah, I didn't. I was thinking more like how the space station was made, but yeah, like well,
Well, but that
I
that is sorry. I mean,
ideally
because
in.
that is a form of space-based construction, right? Because it wasn't
Hmm.
the ISS is not like what the Mir space station and the new Chinese space station is, um, where all the modules are sort of independent of one another,
Hmm.
right? There's no like big, large interlocking systems between them that aren't handled through the docking ports, right? When they connect.
Right.
And that's a simple and that's a good design in a way because it reduces the complexity of on-orbit assembly, right? If you can get them docked together and get them to talk to one another, and they each have their own solar arrays, then what they're really relying on is, service and propulsion on some of them, right? From the overall vehicle, but not them themselves. But then you have a vehicle like the International Space Station, which is not like that. It's not plug and play. Every time a module got added to the International Space Station, electrical cabling, data cabling, the coolant system routings all had to be interwoven and interlocked together. So that's why when we say, like Russia might be leaving the International Space Station program in 2025, they can't just take their modules and say, "Okay, bye, been fun." Because that's not how the space station was designed. So that's why they're talking about as part of their process for withdrawal, would be transferring the ownership of the Russian segment over to the other international partners, right? Over to NASA, Canada, the Canadian, the European Space Agency, and the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency. So, the ISS is a example of how you can do really complex construction and cable routing and everything in orbit. But again, it's still that matter of launching all of the raw materials. Even if you wanted to go more basic than that, back to an original idea for Space Station Freedom, which became the International Space Station in the
Mhm.
90s. But the original idea for that was like they'd be going out there with beams, like welding beams together,
Oh,
like
wow.
physically constructing that, like you're seeing,
It-
not even like you're seeing now, right? Which is very much akin to how they do the ISS, right? Big sections go at a time and get
right.
mated together. I mean, you can also build structures piecemeal, right? One at a time. Like they could have done, like how they built each one of those sections, they could have done vertical like that. I mean, some buildings have to, right? Like skyscrapers in
Mhm.
in New York City and Chicago and London and Paris and everything like that. So, you know, it's it, it again, it's not the complexity of what you do once it's up there. We know how to do that. It's money.
And hopefully in the future, we'll have asteroid mining and stuff like that, and an ability to forge metals and make materials that we can build with, and we don't even need to worry about launch. We launch the equipment to handle these materials, but we don't have to necessarily dig it up from Earth and then launch it into space. Hopefully, there's a time coming down the road where we just go out and grab asteroids and get the raw materials from there. Let's see. See, I had a couple. Oh, yeah, there was one that I was saving for when you got back because it's talking about time. Tony Jebsen
Oh,
said, you don't really want UTC. UT1 or TAI that are from an atomic clock base. UTC has weird leap
mm.
seconds, etc. I can imagine we will end up with a Mars coordinated time. I'm putting that on the screen.
Very true. Very true. Yeah. Oh gosh, all those leap second things. Yeah. Oh, they get so hard to keep track of. I mean, and so does leap year because like I always grew up thinking like, wait, leap year is every 4 years, right?
Right? Not
No, it's not.
necessarily.
It's every 4 years except on like years ending in double zero. So like 1900 and 1800 and 1700 didn't
But then
have a
there's
leap year,
but
but
but then
but
there's
if
like then there's
that
like the
year is
four.
divisible by 4,
Yeah.
it does have a leap year, which is why 2000 had a leap year, which is why nobody knows that this thing exists. But yes,
Right.
anyway, I agree with you. Atomic time, yes. And I agree. I think that's exactly what's going to end up happening on Mars is we're going to end up having a Mars coordinated time.
Yeah.
And that's just how it's going to have to happen. Yeah.
All right. Fireworking said, how will they attach the segments? Welding? I think it's going to be bolts like they had it bolted down before. Do we know?
Bolts and welding, I believe. I believe it's a combination of
Both.
both.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. There you go. And let's see. We've got €5 from Bram Jacobs. No message, but thank you very much. Um, Same with Gio Suarez, GOT fan. I believe that's Game of Thrones. Thank you very much. Um, let's see. Chris Warner wanted to know what happened to BN2. Did they bypass for BN3?
Yep, they did.
Yep, sure enough. Let's see. All right. Christopher Thomas with $5 says, I don't actually see Mars being colonized. It's prohibitively expensive. There's no good reason to live there unless it can be profitable for us all.
Mm,
I don't know. I mean, not everything that happens is profitable for everybody.
Yeah, I
And
don't
if,
think Antarctica research is profitable
right.
necessarily. I mean, it might
Yeah.
be profitable
yeah.
in terms of the knowledge gained from it is worth doing, but it has to be funded by research grants. It's not like Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola is saying, "Oh, we want to produce our beverages in Antarctica because it makes sense. So we're gonna fund that and build a factory there." That's not how it works. There's no commercial gains from that for the most part. So it's all funded by research grants.
Yeah, and once
Yeah.
there's enough people on Mars, it's going to have, sort of its own economy, but it's not going to be completely separate from Earth. There's still, I'm sure, going to be some sort of trade, I would
Well, so
think.
yeah, I mean, but well, I mean, there'd have to be. I mean, for at least a long time in terms of supply lines,
Mhm.
from Earth to whatever Martian settlements arise. But you know, you are entirely correct, right? That the way most people are going to look at it is where's the profit, right? Um, where's the what's in it for me? And I mean, certainly human history is filled with examples of that type of exploration. I think we like to mythicize a lot of the people who quote unquote found places that were already inhabited, so they weren't
Right.
found. But we tend to mythicize a lot of it, but what were they looking for? They were looking for trade routes going the
Yeah.
opposite direction of the way they knew they you know should be going, which when you think about it and people are like, they thought the earth was flat back then why did they go the other direction?
Right.
Anyway,
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
digression.
They'd already
And
done that.
because
They'd
they
already
didn't,
figured
they
that
knew
out.
it was
Yeah.
round. Yeah,
Yeah.
a long time ago. But yes, it was. But there was a moment, right? I mean, you when you go back in human history, right? There is a moment where that exploration, it always had a motivation to it, but it wasn't necessarily profit, right? So there is that thing of like where does profitability intersect with just sheer what's over the horizon? And is it expensive to do this? Yeah. Is it insane on its surface to go, let's go to this place that can't support us for a second, even if we needed it to?
Right.
That seems like a good place to go live. Except, why do humans live in the desert? Why do we have settlements in Antarctica? Right.
Yeah. Because people want to live
I
there. Like,
because people wanna do it, right? And
yeah.
I mean, sure, there'll be different reasons, but, like, a lot of this is more akin to at least to me, not the initial motivation of the people who fund it, right?
Mhm.
But everyone who then goes, "Oh, please, me," you know,
Hmm.
take me," you know, that that's not necessarily just a profit motivation, and that's where all the sort of human motivations of why we do things and why we move different places, I think, become key to off-world settlements, whether they be lunar-based or Martian-based.
I think this quote here, it doesn't even have the at NASA spaceflight tag, but I just happened to notice it on the scrolling chat. Quote from Carl Sagan says, "We began as wanderers, and we are wanderers still. We have lingered long enough on the shores of the cosmic ocean. We are ready at last to set sail for the stars." That's where I come in on it. It was Carl Sagan that really got me into this stuff, and that's sort of where I come down on it. Is humans, we have this instinct to look over the next hill, and we've looked over most of the hills on Earth. I mean, there's a lot in the bottom of the ocean that we haven't explored, but you know, now the hill is space and
Yeah.
moving out into the cosmos. If i- if our reasoning is just simply because we're oh, let me put that quote on the screen. Um, Even if it's just because we're curious, there's going to be a benefit in the end, and this is like super long game. Humanity will eventually move out into the cosmos. Why not now?
Yeah.
I don't think
If you're
that
just
I don't think anybody thinks that we should be confined to the planet for the next billion years. So let's do it now.
It does look like the tower is pretty much stacked. I think that right center column is fully flushed with the beam below it, and the far right and the far left columns are pretty close. So it looks like they have almost completed the first stacking of a launch tower segment. Of course, they're going to have to bolt the columns into place now, but definitely making progress here. And it was a slow lift, but definitely exciting to see this orbital launch tower come together. We should expect to see, six. I think we're estimating somewhere between 7 to 8 segments in total. So this would make two. There's still several more stacking operations to come, and that crane will have to get taller as the tower gets taller. So going to be exciting, and we'll continue to watch this as they continue future stacking operations. We will also bring as many as possible to you live. So I think this stacking operation was exciting, but wait until the final segment is going on top of the 400-foot tower. That will be especially exciting.
Oh yeah. Okay. Let's see. Got €5 from Dozen Shrek. Greetings from Germany. Still awaiting Landing Club merch, but love your great coverage. Go on with your great work. Thank you very much. Mike Lewis. This is just silly. Guys, pick it back up. I left my phone under one of the pillars. Thanks for the $5, Mike. Let's see. Oh, okay. This is a good one. Let's see. Acobus Tress. I'm probably saying your name terribly. With $10, wouldn't the moment a human steps onto Mars be a good time to institute a Stardate system of tracking time? Yeah, it could be. Good a time as any. Let's do that. Let's see. Nick Hill Chandra, how many boosters SpaceX should manufacture for proposed 1,000 Starships? Must be less than 1,000, maybe 100. Yeah, how many? Okay, I think they're asking how many boosters, how many super heavies do we think that they'll need to
I don't think
to
they've ever
launch?
said.
Yeah,
Well, I think
that'd
Elon
be
said thousands of starships, so I think starships will be in the thousands.
yeah. So maybe not as many super heavies. I don't know. It'd be pure speculation, honestly. Um, okay, let's see. Rob Meads said on the horizontal struts of the tower were those many little stick out bits there originally, and any idea what purpose they serve? On the
They
horizontal
were. They're just for helping them connect everything together now that
Okay.
it's there.
Okay. Let's see. Overlord Raven said Starship is a bus, truck, or train. Once it's reliable, it will be our cost effective gateway to colonization in the next frontier. You guys rock. P.S. Go metric. Go metric. Um, all right. I mean, I've just about reached the end of the queue. John Wissink, we got a new member. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Yeah. There was a comment that I put in the queue a little bit ago. Where was it? Oh, do you think that the orbital pad and all the other stuff will be ready in July?
No.
No.
I mean,
No.
the answer is no. Uh, I I think it's pretty obvious, but I will say that July 1st is no longer their current goal. It has changed. I don't know what the new date is. It's sometime later in the summer, but you can just imagine that they're not going to be launching on July 1st when they've never even built a super heavy that was capable of going to the pad yet. The BN1 prototype was a Pathfinder. It was not suitable for being loaded with propellant. In fact, it even chopped off the lowest ring, or one of the lower rings of the liquid oxygen tank. So that was not flight worthy, and they have yet to produce a flight worthy booster. A BN3 is still being stacked into high bay. So a long way away from being ready to launch to orbit. Of course, a long way away means more than July 1st. It does not mean it won't happen this year. But
Yeah. This is an interesting question. I don't know. Basil, I am not even going to try to say your last name. So with SN15 going away, could it be the end of SpaceX using suborbital pads? I mean, it's possible. We don't know. We don't know if they want to do another suborbital hop. They do have a couple that are basically ready to go. You said it was which numbers was it? Was it 16 and 17 that are basically constructed and could go on a
I think
flight?
Michael said earlier that 17 has a big hole in it
There's 17
now
with a hole.
from
Okay.
something they did to it. I think the only thing the suborbital pads would be useful for is when starships are constructed. Elon has said that they would just be flown to the um, the floating drone ships, Phobos and Deimos. So I would assume that the suborbital pads would stay in use for that. Sort of, the Starship is built now, it needs to, like an aircraft, be delivered to its first location for flight.
I hope so. I hope their suborbital pads are not done because those test flights have been so exciting and the last two have been clouded out. So really crossing my fingers we get another suborbital flight from Boca Chica.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. I'm gonna hit a bunch of these people that have thrown super chats our way. We appreciate your help. ECE. We've got FZR600. We've got David Pierce. We appreciate you. New member Alex. We've got Gary Collins down here. Thank you for the support. Overlord Raven, I think you already got in there once. Okay, welcome back. Ralph Juniper says thank you. Well, thank you. Muddy Creek Critters said the OLIT segment has landed and it fits. Yep, it's looking good. I still see a little bit of a gap on the left side, but they're making their way. Let's see. Doc Watson, thank you for the support. We have Tankzilla and Frankencrane. What would your nickname for the tower be? That's we can ponder on that. Maybe Chad will help us out, or these. It's got to be done organically. You don't want to force it. Let's see. Mars Labs, thank you for the support. Keith Wells, this is a good point. 22,000 plus people watching grass grow. Talk about a dedicated bunch of space
Grass
nerds we all are. We're watching towers grow.
This is way cooler than grass. I don't know if you think grass is that entertaining, but this is entertaining. So,
Yeah.
first orbital launch tower segment being stacked. We are one step closer to seeing a full stack Starship Super Heavy launch from Boca Chica, or Starbase, as it's called now.
Yeah. And the taller this tower gets, like it's going to give us a pretty good idea of what Starship's going to look like when it's fully stacked, before we actually get to see it on the pad. Will Super Heavy and Starship be delivered to the orbital pad separately and then stacked once on the pad, do we think? Or
Yes,
will it be stacked?
separately
You
for
think so?
sure, because the tower will be used to stack the vehicles.
Okay. Let's see. I don't know this reference, but Joe Fisher said, "Hey NSF, do you believe that there might be a permanent all-around aspect civilization on something like a habitat or hubs?" Oh, this isn't the one with the reference, but I believe there might be a permanent all-around aspect civilization. Oh, like one big habitat. Like I'm thinking of what was that movie? It's a Cowboy Bebop, I think, where it's like they live in a crater and it has like
Yes.
a big dome over it. And I think it's like
Yeah.
an atmospheric dome. I don't even think it's like a glass dome. I think they somehow figured out a way to, I mean, it's an
Yeah,
anime, so they can do what they want.
I'm yeah, like I'm not familiar with the two references that are specifically made here, but like if you're talking about like large off-planetary locations in the solar system, right, where like huge basically cities, right, would be constructed and would serve as like waypoints basically between the solar system. I mean, sure. I mean, I think things like that, I mean, are certainly in our future. If that sort of sustainable development and comfortability with living off Earth, living on Mars first, right, and then really understanding how the human body can, as safely as possible, live in worlds where you're either creating your own gravity or the gravity field is weak. So how does the body react to that? I think that's all very possible. Yeah, and it's one of the reasons, honestly, that I love that show, The Expanse, and the book series, The Expanse, because of how grounded it sort of is for envisioning where we might be technologically in a few hundred years from now.
Yeah.
Let's maybe do a final speed run of the super chat queue and then wrap up because it looks like the tower is attached to the lower section now.
All right.
The teams are going to be bolting that thing together, obviously, over the course of the next several hours. But I think the excitement for today is pretty much wrapping up.
All right. Well, everybody, thanks for your questions, and of course, thank you for your super chat. Keeps us rolling here. There are still a few like questions and comments in here, but I'm just gonna burn through the ones I can read anyway. Brian Gindling, thank you very much for your super chat. Mario Lomedico, Technoblaze, Zachary Lee, Mark Wayne, Joe DiGiorgio, Joey Rogers, Bama Bubba, MX39, Jorgen Martinson Larson, thank you, Ron Watkins, Colton Collingwood, and James Lee Babb. Thank you, everybody, for the super chats and questions and just hanging out with us. I mean, it is amazing. It's not grass growing, but it's towers growing, and it's really awesome that people actually want to watch this along with us. Mary's out there in the field bringing you this awesome view. So thanks to her, obviously, she does this day in and day out, and that's where those daily videos come from. Uh, they get edited and put out every single day, so make sure you're subscribed. Like videos, it helps us out. Just it makes it more visible for anybody that maybe has never heard of NASA spaceflight. Um, let's see. So I can go ahead and tell you who we are now that you've been watching us for a couple hours. I'm Stephen Marr. I'm a photographer for NASA spaceflight over here on the Space Coast. So anytime there's a launch here, you'll see photos of mine out there in the Twitter world and Instagram and Facebook and all that stuff. I have a Patreon. I'll throw it out there. Patreon.com/SpaceCoastSteve is where you can find me if you want to throw me a couple of bucks. But with me, I have my colleague and co-host Chris Gebhardt, the assistant managing editor for NASA Spaceflight.
Indeed, it's been awesome talking towers and space and Mars and colonization efforts and everything as we watched them stack this tower this morning.
Yeah, it's cool. I didn't realize I would be so interested. It's really cool. And then pulling the levers and strings behind the scenes, we also have had Michael Baylor jumping in and answering some questions and stuff.
Thanks
Michael.
for tuning in, everyone.
Yeah. And so with that, is there anything else we need to do before we
Well,
sign on
Mary
out of
out
here?
in the field too. So
Mary.
thanks to Mary, and I think we also might have Doss here. Is that true?
I was just like skidding in all of a sudden to see if I had missed it. Did I miss anything exciting?
No, boring stream. Nothing happened.
The tower looks slightly taller today, it seems now.
Oh, really? Huh.
What? No. It's just that big steel blade of grass that's growing in the background there, I guess
That's
we were
right.
talking about, right?
That's right.
Good deal. It looks like they've got to. Is there like another segment coming up, or is this the tower stacking for the day?
This is
Yeah,
it for
this is
today.
it.
The remaining sections are still back at the production site.
Ah, geez. So I got here just in time, huh?
You got it here just in time to see us out.
Oh man, I'm sorry I missed it. I'll have to scroll back and see what it looks like. Maybe a time lapse or something. I had to go before an arbiter for a personal matter earlier, and let me tell you, it was nothing like Halo made it seem. I'm
Fair
back
enough.
though. I'm back. Good job
W-
today, y'all. Go ahead and
yeah,
close it
thanks.
down.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in and following along with us and hearing us drone on about space things. The most exciting thing that humans do, I think. So with that, stay tuned for the daily video. I'm sure we'll actually probably put out a time lapse of this happening. So make sure you're subscribed to NASA Spaceflight. Make sure you're also following NASA Spaceflight on Twitter. And with that, we bid you adieu.
We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be normal.
RCP chamber pressure looks good. Toggling up. Roger, roll, Atlantic. Flight downside of speed off. Speed off.
Yikes. You bet. Sure. We don't need any more of these.